Hi, everyone. So thanks for having us this morning. It sounds like Yuri's spending $100 million to find aliens, and we have one here. An alien of extraordinary ability. Most of you probably know a little bit about Vitalik. I'm not going to go through his whole bio. That's what Google's for. But just as a quick, interesting background or note, I discovered cryptocurrencies in 2013, and for me, they were a brain virus is kind of the best way to describe it. When you first understand the concept, it's sort of all you can think about. And in the 4 years subsequent, all I managed to do was invest a little bit here and there, write a little bit about it, and just try and understand it. In that period of time, in late 2013, Vitalik, very young at the time, 18, 19, how old were you?
When I created Ethereum?
Yes.
Yeah, 19.
19 years old, conceived of the project, tried to build it on top of Mastercoin, spun it out as his own thing, and created what is the most exciting project in the space since Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that is, originally created Bitcoin. And as you all hopefully know, it's a platform for distributed applications in a trustless, secure, decentralized way. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. We'll try and keep it very high level because I understand this is a general audience. But yeah, without further ado, here's Vitalik. And we're going to talk a little bit about Ethereum. So please give him a big welcome. Maybe we'll just start very high level. In your own words, how would you describe Ethereum to the average person, why it's important?
Yeah, so first of all, there's two kinds of average people. There's the average person who has already heard of Bitcoin, and there's the average person who hasn't, right? So, I mean, for the first category, it's a bit easier because if you understand what Bitcoin is, and you understand that it's a peer-to-peer digital currency, and you understand that if you want to have a digital currency that's decentralized, then you need some kind of database to store how much money everyone has, right? Like if I have 100, digital Bitcoin dollars or digital whatever, cash, and I send 100 to you, and I also send the same 100 to someone else, then those are two transactions, either one of which is legal by itself, but both of which are illegal in combination because they'd be turning 100 units of cash into 200. And this is the classic double spending problem, and in order to solve it, you basically need to have some system that keeps track of, have these coins already been spent? How much money do I actually have at any given time? How much money do I have the right to spend at any given time? And you can very easily do this with a centralized server, but if you want to do this in a way that's decentralized, which is, Bitcoin's original point in the spirit of things like BitTorrent, it's actually a very hard computer science problem to figure out how to do it. And Satoshi Nakamoto probably came up with the first solution that, really is practical in this kind of open permissionless context, which is, the Nakamoto blockchain. And that was where, the idea of blockchain technology in general came from. Now, where Ethereum comes from is basically you take that idea, the idea that you can use what I call cryptoeconomics, so a combination of cryptographic algorithms, things like hashing and digital signatures, and the kinds of economic incentives that keep systems like Bitcoin going, and use them to create these kind of decentralized networks with memory, so these kind of decentralized database-like things, for a whole bunch of other applications as well, right? So around 2013, people started realizing really that these blockchains are usable for much more than peer-to-peer digital currency. And the first major thing aside from Bitcoin was probably Namecoin, which was trying to do a peer-to-peer decentralized DNS, but then people started thinking, can you do other kinds of digital assets? Can you do smart contracts? Can you do financial agreements? Can you do registries about identity? Can you do all these other things? And there were so many applications that building a blockchain for each one doesn't really work. And so the core idea behind Ethereum is, you can have a general purpose blockchain. We can have a blockchain where instead of the blockchain working like a Swiss Army knife where you have, 5 different tools for 5 different categories of applications, you have a blockchain that understands a general purpose programming language. So, kind of like your phone, in your phone you have Android or, iOS. And inside of Android or inside of iOS, you can have apps. The apps are written in, whatever programming language they're written in. Anyone can create an app, anyone can download an app and run it. So that was the kind of general purpose flexibility I was trying to bring to the blockchain world.
Yeah, it's amazing, the concept of a Turing-complete blockchain in the computer science speak that can execute any arbitrary program given enough resources is pretty incredible. And it seems daunting because the idea of a blockchain is that everybody, one of the implementations of a blockchain is that everybody executes a copy of the code on themselves to verify that what is supposed to happen actually happens. So that begets a whole slew of problems like scaling and trust and so on. But just kind of easing into that, what kinds of applications do you think an Ethereum blockchain is suited well for? Like applications you both have people building today and ones in the future?
Yeah, so I think there's a few major categories. So, anything to do with like the currency itself is obviously going to be a major category pretty much forever.
Because you want the security associated.
Yeah, exactly. Like currency seems to be naturally the kind of application that's fairly well suited, because like the general way that I categorize like applications that are good blockchain applications is to think of what a blockchain is, right? So the way I define a blockchain is it's a decentralized system that contains some kind of shared memory. And in Bitcoin's case, the shared memory is how many Bitcoins everyone has at some time, but it could be anything. So a good blockchain application is an application that, number one, needs decentralization, and number two, needs some concept of shared memory. And the case for decentralization in cryptocurrencies themselves, I think, is fairly clear, but you can actually even go beyond that, right? You can think about, if you have decentralized cryptocurrencies, then you can build many other things on top of them. And there was this interesting idea that Nick Szabo came up with about 25 years ago that was called a smart contract. And he made an analogy to vending machines, right? So what he said was that a vending machine is a device implemented in physical hardware that basically implements the conditions of some kind of an agreement. And the conditions of the agreement here are simple. You put $2 in, water comes out. You do not put $2 in, water does not come out. If you do not put $2 in, but water does come out, then that's bad. And the vending machine is basically an encoding of this set of rules, and that also comes with a mechanism that keeps it at least kind of secure. Secure enough for $2 water bottles. Now, with digital assets, you can think about this kind of concept and push it much, much further, because in the digital world, in the world of cryptography, it's this world where even individuals are capable of basically having cryptographic defenses that are strong enough to even sometimes ward off state-level actors. And when you have that kind of security, the possibilities go up, right? So the general notion of a smart contract is that it's like a computer program that directly controls digital assets. The kind of direct control here is important, right? It's not a computer program that makes a recommendation to a guy about how the guy should control the digital asset. It's a computer program that controls the digital asset. Like on Ethereum, you can literally send a bunch of Ether into a computer program, and once you've done this, the computer program itself has basically the unilateral ability to control where the money goes. If the computer program sends the money to address A, it goes to address A. If it wants to send it to address B, it goes to address B. And if it doesn't want to send it anywhere at all, then the money just stays there. And you can see this being used in a bunch of applications like insurance, just like any kind of self-executing financial contract. You can reduce counterparty risk in a lot of those kinds of applications by potentially a really huge amount. You could imagine it being used for more complex things. So there's this idea of DAOs, which are like these entire long-running entities that hold on to digital assets and basically use those digital assets in various ways according to these kind of fairly complex sets of rules. And you could even imagine, systems for crowdfunding. So if you think about what Kickstarter does, for example, it's people throw in money. If they've thrown in enough money within 30 days, then the money goes to the developer. And if they do not send in enough money, then everyone gets refunded. And that's like a set of rules that could be replicated in a piece of code. Now, outside the financial world, there's a lot of possibilities as well. So like the DNS is just one simple and natural one. And there is already a system on Ethereum called ENS, the Ethereum name system. And like this idea of giving human readable names that are in some ways like not tied to any kind of issuer is also one that just seems very interesting. You could imagine expanding this to identities, and you could take this concept pretty far.
So you can replace money, you can replace Wall Street, you can replace core internet protocols. Right. What else can you do? In fact, I remember I looked at your About Me page, and it has this funny story. I don't know if it's real or not, but you first saw the power of decentralized, or at least the demand for decentralized applications, when your World of Warcraft character had his rules changed on him by a Blizzard update. And that annoyed you so much that you had to go out and build something like Ethereum. So in theory, you could even build a massively multiplayer game on top of Ethereum, where everyone can have the rules verified, right?
Well, the story's true, though the fact that them nerfing Siphon Life and leading to me crying myself to sleep is what led directly to Ethereum is a bit exaggerated.
I do encourage you to check out Vitalik's About Me page. It's a riot. So now, obviously, if you're going to replace all of these different systems, you have a scaling issue. You have to figure out, especially with a centralized mechanism like that, even just to handle Visa's throughput, let alone every imaginable smart contract, that's not going to work if everyone's running a copy of every program on their computer.
Yeah, totally. So, if you look at just the raw numbers of blockchains today, Bitcoin is currently processing a bit less than 3 transactions a second, and if it goes close to 4, then it's already at peak capacity. Ethereum, right, over the last few days, it's been doing about 5 a second, and if it goes above 6, then it's also at peak capacity. So, on the other hand, Uber on average 12 rides a second, PayPal several hundred, Visa several thousand, major stock exchanges tens of thousands, and if you want to go up to IoT, then you're talking hundreds of thousands. And if you want to go up to non-financial applications, so like for example, there's a platform called Leroy, which is basically just Twitter on the blockchain, then you're talking also about hundreds of thousands, possibly millions. So, there is a kind of gap from here to there. And I think right now there already is really a lot of institutional hype in the space and just public hype. So when you have, like Vladimir Putin having, knowing what blockchains and Ethereum are, and Paris Hilton going out promoting ICOs on Twitter, that's peak hype. But the reason, I think a large part of the reason why a lot of this hasn't materialized into action yet is precisely because of some of these technical obstacles that make blockchains, work okay for some niche use cases, but not really work well for mainstream use. Now, our team is working very hard on various kinds of scalability solutions, so you hear about buzzwords like plasma, sharding, state channels, write-in, there's various newer ones like Perun. So, if all of these are various different ideas that actually do try to kind of break through this fundamental barrier, right? That try to either create blockchains that still maintain a large amount of security without requiring everyone to literally process everything. Right, so if you think about it, like one extreme is one guy processes everything, which is today's world. The other extreme is everyone processes everything. Well, what if you can get like square root of everyone, so like maybe 500 people processing each transaction? You still get enough decentralization and security for everything you need, but suddenly it's, within, it's efficient enough that, it actually works for stuff in the real world. And the other kinds of strategies are strategies that try to use the blockchain in a kind of more intelligently, right? So it's basically, like one of the analogies that like Joseph Poon from Plasma uses a lot is the idea of the blockchain as a court system, right? So blockchains are great at securely resolving disputes, and currently the way the naive blockchain applications work is they just put every single transaction on the blockchain. But what you could do instead is you could have systems where people send messages that I call kind of tickets, so digitally signed messages that are off-chain by default, but where the blockchain only gets used in those specific cases where there's a disagreement. So like if I have 100 digital, 100 ether, and I send you the 100 ether, then that might not ever go off chain. But if I send you the 100 ether and then you claim that I never sent you the money, or I claim that I never sent you the money, then that's a transaction that I could, we have a dispute, and I could actually push it down onto the blockchain, and so we still have, a guarantee of security. Now, all of these approaches have their own trade-offs, and there's this huge amount of incremental technical work involved in figuring out what the right trade-offs are, but this starts looking like a direction that's much more promising.
And how far along are we? How long until you think that maybe we can scale to, as you said, hundreds of concurrent users? How many until we can replace Visa? How many until we can replace AWS?
I mean, for things like Visa, I think definitely, I would say a couple of years. So maybe 1 year when we start seeing like prototypes that have, like a low security level, but are still, secure enough for like major organizations to start just doing proof of concepts on. And a couple more years for all these solutions to really hit the mainstream. AWS is a trickier one because like there are reasons why blockchains are, no matter how good they are, never going to completely replace centralized cloud computing. And probably even more, one of the big ones, there's probably two big ones in my opinion. One big one is that there are computations that are intensive and that are hard to parallelize. So decentralized clouds are really good at parallelization because it's like Uber for your laptop. You got millions of computers from millions of countries, millions of providers, all ranging from individual laptops to you can think of even cloud computing companies basically turning into like specialized mining farms inside of the system. But if you have computations that require like a really large amount of serial computation, then that's harder to decentralize. And the second really tough one is privacy, right? Like if you have computations on private data, then there's basically two approaches. One of them is to make sure the computations are only done on hardware that you trust, and the second one is to use fancy cryptography. So you might have heard of buzzwords like homomorphic encryption and distinguishability obfuscation to do the computations. But then if you do that, then those tends to carry very serious computational efficiency trade-offs.
So basically for private or serial applications, you're going to do them locally?
Yeah, like in general, I think like there's always going to be this large set of applications where decentralized approaches like actually don't work that well, and that's fine. Yeah.
And so you're essentially building something between an operating system and a protocol for the world on the fly. It's going to take a decade probably to get to full scalability and hopefully adoption. What do you do in terms of there's a classic operating system developer question that they wonder about is how wide do I go and how high do I go? So do you start adopting other applications into the stack? All these people are doing ICOs, they're building layer 2 tokens on top of Ethereum. Do you see Ethereum adopting any of their functionalities, or does it stay as a broad, wide underlying layer?
Like one of Ethereum's slogans right from the start has actually been, we have no features. Right, so like a lot of the other projects are definitely going in that direction. They're saying, oh, we support this new class of transaction for issuing a token. Oh, we support this new class of transaction that issues an ICO. And look, you can have your 5 parameters with like a cap, like period, like type of auction or whatever. But with Ethereum, we've never gone down that road. Basically, for a couple of reasons. One of them is that you want the protocol to be maximally simple because simplifying the protocol just improves consensus security. So the more consensus code you have in the protocol rules, the more likely it is you'll have issues like 2 different implementations like not being in sync with each other, leading to the blockchain just randomly splitting in half. The other big reason, of course, is just unknown unknowns. We have really no idea what blockchains are going to be used for like 5 or 10 years from now, right? And we don't really want. We are okay with making some specialized components that get used a lot. So like Ethereum, or we have a next update, Metropolis, which is coming in October, and one of the major things that's coming in that is like explicit in-protocol support for certain kinds of cryptographic operations. So like ring signatures, elliptic curve pairings, which get used as part of zero-knowledge proofs. So the major theme here basically being like strong cryptography and privacy. And like that is kind of specialized, but it's also very generic because almost any application could benefit from privacy. So we are willing to compromise somewhat in that direction, but we really don't want to compromise in favor of like really supporting high efficiency in every single application. Now, if that means that there are specific application categories where some platforms outcompete Ethereum, then that's fine. Like we don't need to be everything to everyone. But there are also going to be ways to kind of specialize even within the Ethereum ecosystem as well, right? So there's like projects like Cosmos, things like Plasma. All of these are trying to provide second layer systems that connects to Ethereum, and in many cases are even designed in order to take advantage of the base Ethereum blockchain for security, but that can have properties of their own, and that if they run well could have things like a 500 millisecond block time, so you can run StarCraft on the blockchain. So, those things are possible, and if you adopt this approach where if you have Ethereum as this kind of base layer that, it does a good job of balancing between the kinds of the high level of security and the scalability that a base layer needs, and then allows these other things with various different properties to get built on top, then you actually can have a blockchain ecosystem that works really well.
Got it. So you want it to be a secure base layer that doesn't have too many features and really lets the innovation happen on top. But you have things like privacy and security and consensus at the core layer. But the big application that everyone is obsessed about, in fact, I think the reason why people are so interested in cryptocurrencies these days is just because they're making money off of them. So the fundamental application right now seems to be just money. And Bitcoin seems to be willing to, the protocol is in service of the currency. And here it seems almost the opposite. Is that fair to say?
The currency is in the service of the protocol. Yeah, definitely. I definitely say that is our philosophy. Although, yeah, it's definitely the case that there's a lot of adoption purely because of people's speculative interest. But then, on the other hand, that's not, that has a bad side and a good side, right? And I think one of the good sides really is that, in part because of this, there actually is a lot more interest in the possible social benefits of the decentralized technology than there are in, many of the other approaches that have been tried, over the last decade. If you look at diaspora, great idea, ended up failing completely, right? And, a lot of these kind of decentralized projects tends to not work very well, and in a large part because basically lack of funding and just lack of a kind of good incentive for actually building out the infrastructure. Whereas here in the cryptocurrency land, there's a lot of money, and at least that one particular problem can be solved.
Right. So now because we've married the economics to the crypto, the incentive issues are solved, and economic incentives can unite people in a way that pure politics cannot.
Yeah, crypto is really ultimately all about incentives on multiple levels, from the community all the way down to, the security of the consensus protocol. You just cannot reason about security of, blockchain consensus protocols without reasoning about economics. It's not about if half of these people are honest, then we can prove the system is secure, or if Magic Bob in the sky is honest, we know the system is secure. The system is secure because we have mathematical proofs that say if the system breaks, then the guy who did it loses $100 million. Right, so that's what we mean by crypto economics, combining together this kind of cryptography, mathematical proofs, and economic game theory reasoning all together.
So if you assemble all this together, it used to be in God we trust, then it used to be in nation states we trust. Now it's going to be in math we trust.
Yeah.
Are the nation states going to take this lying down? You just came back from China. You saw what's happening there.
Yeah, it's in the way that traditional political, just economic powers are going to respond to all of this is definitely going to be I think a big part of the story over the next few years. It is, ultimately it really does disrupt traditional power structures. And whether it's Washington, New York, or Silicon Valley, it really does pose serious challenges to the way that things are working now. But on the other hand, it's one of the things we've learned actually is that a lot of the people, even inside these power structures, seem not all of them, but at least some of them seem quite friendly to these ideas of disruption. There definitely are plenty of JP Morgan employees who are really excited about the possibilities of blockchain technology, and it's. The fact that you work for a large company or that you work for a government, doesn't mean that you're a hopelessly boring suit, right? One of my favorite examples of this is that in Taiwan there's a politician named Audrey Tang, and she's transgender, and she describes herself as a conservative anarchist, and yet she is the head of, I believe, the digital ministry of the Taiwanese government, right? So, you these kinds of people, this is obviously like someone who's particularly special, and she has been recognized as like one of the 10 kind of greatest programmers there. But to much lesser degrees, these kinds of people do exist, and large organizations in general are complex, right? You have people with one kind of belief on one side, with another kind of belief on the other side. Even if you look at the Chinese government, like their response, I think, has clearly been showed that there are different groups of people inside of the government who have like different ideas about which direction they want to go. And like lately, if you look at all the news about like them regulating VPNs and chat groups and so forth, it's obvious that kind of the arc of this decade is that the conservative side over there is winning. And to be fair, a lot of those things are happening in many other places in the world as well. But large organizations are definitely still diverse.
It's amazing China is finding out that its financial and capital control policy boils down to its firewall policy.
Yeah.
So we could talk for hours. I mean, Vitalik's knowledge is incredible. Here we've just scratched just the bare surface. Yeah. I encourage you to follow him on Twitter, where he's incredibly good-natured about all the trolls that are constantly attacking him. So don't be one of those people. And learn everything you can about Ethereum, because it really is very much the future in cryptocurrency. So thank you for being with us, Vitalik, and after your short trip to China.
The following is a conversation.
Hi there, I'm Jeff Bishop.
Great Reset agenda revealed. And I know this sounds like tinfoil hat stuff, but I can promise you it isn't. It's straight from the World Economic Forum's website. We're going to dive right in. I'm going to explain this whole thing to you, why it won't work from an economic standpoint, and what the most likely end game is for you and me.
The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our peace since World War II. Klaus Schwab. Thank you, Adrian. It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased cooperation and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. In short, we need a great reset.
Now is the time to think what history would say about this crisis. And now is the time for all of us to define our own role. What is it that would make it so that history would look at this crisis as the great opportunity for reset?
The Great Reset is a welcome recognition that this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investments, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
And I'll give you a moment to shake off the creepiness of these people at the World Economic Forum. It's headed up by a guy named Klaus Schwab. That's who you saw right at the beginning. And I've got him drawn here to perfection, of course, and he is with his cat. We'll go ahead and call him Mr. Bigglesworth for obvious reasons. This bizarre photo that or what I'm calling the BDC, bizarre, disturbing, and creepy. More on that later. I'll get off that topic. Let's get into the meat of the video and the actual economics. So what is this Great Reset? Well, let's go to a recent post from Klaus himself outlining, ironically, his 3 steps to this Great Reset agenda. The title of this post by Klaus is "Now is the Time for a Great Reset." And it starts off with this bizarre photo that Klaus, I guess, thinks is clever somehow. Push to reset the world. Alrighty then. So we're going down to his 3 steps, or what he calls 3 main components of the Great Reset agenda. The first would steer the market toward fairer outcomes. And I want to point out the words he's using. First, steer, which would imply that he believes in this top-down approach because these global elites are so intellectually superior to all of us rubes in the real economy that we need them to tell us what to do. And second, he's choosing the word outcome instead of opportunity. More on that in just a moment. To this end, government should improve coordination. For example, in tax, of course, regulatory and fiscal policy. Upgrade trade arrangements and create the conditions for a quote-unquote stakeholder economy. At a time of diminishing tax bases and soaring public debt, governments have a powerful incentive to pursue such action. And I'd remind you that governments don't have any resources. They don't produce anything. The only thing they have control over is what they steal from the private sector production. Moreover, governments should implement long overdue reforms that promote more equitable outcomes. And again, he's not using the word opportunities, he's using the word outcomes. Depending on the country, these may include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. The second component of the Great Reset agenda would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. We go right back to implying equal outcomes and not equal opportunities. The third and final priority of the Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good. You always got to like it when bureaucrats use that terminology, especially by harnessing health and social challenges. And we'll get into the fourth industrial revolution in just a moment. Lastly, I want to point out Klaus's own quote that he uses in his post. And remember, this isn't an editor. Klaus is writing this himself. So out of all of the sentences in the article, he chooses this one in particular to quote, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity." He's saying that the pandemic is an opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. Let that sink in for a moment. So if that didn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, let's go into the pictograph that he had at the end of this post. And it's this round circle that revolves around the Great Reset agenda. And all of these things on the exterior of this circle feed into these 7 main points. And we'll get into some of those in just a moment. But these main points that go into this Great Reset start with strengthening regional development. I have no idea what that is or how you achieve that objective. And you'll notice with all of these, there are these broad stroke, overgeneralized platitudes that don't mean anything whatsoever. They have no meat and substance to them. Next is revitalizing global cooperation, developing sustainable business models, which I always thought meant the business just had to make profit, but I guess those days are long gone. Restoring health in the environment, okay, I kind of get that one. Redesign social contract, skills, and jobs. I have no idea what a social contract is, but it doesn't sound very enticing at all, especially if it's coming from Klaus and his friends. Shaping an economic recovery. I'm all for an economic recovery right now, but I'm not in favor of these global elites shaping it in the form that they see fit. Lastly is this 4th industrial revolution. So what is this exactly? Editor, let's go ahead and throw up a couple charts that explain it further. If you look at it, it's really just about advancing technology. We've got real-time optimization, cloud computing, cyber physical systems, additive manufacturing, I'm not sure what that is, maybe 3D printing, cobot, augmented reality, and this is where it starts to get really bizarre in my opinion, machine learning, Internet of Things, and of course, big data. What else would you expect from global elites that want to micromanage your entire life and know where you are and what you're doing at all times? I wouldn't exactly put this up there with the Industrial Revolution, electricity, the telephone, things of this nature, but this is what they're calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. I also wanted to point out another one of their diagrams that add a couple more things to the mix of augmented reality, big data. We've got controlled system. That does not sound good. What sounds even worse is a monitoring tool. And let's go back to this picto diagram and further examine some of these suggestions on the exterior of this circle that they think will lead into this great reset. So one of the ways we're going to supposedly harness this 4th industrial revolution is by the future of media, entertainment, and culture. Okay. Strengthening regional development. We're going to somehow achieve that through biodiversity. It's not that I'm opposed to biodiversity, it's just I don't think it will help us strengthen regional development in any way, shape, or form. And they want to revitalize global cooperation in things like international security. Basically what that means is more invasion on your personal privacy, such as banking and FATCA regulations. And sustainable business models are somehow going to be a result of agile governance. And restoring the health of the environment is somehow going to come from something they're calling a circular economy. Redesigning social contracts, skills, and jobs will achieve that through justice and law. And I always like the word justice because who defines exactly what justice is? Is that going to be Klaus or is that going to be me and you? And finally, my favorite is shaping the economic recovery. We're going to get out of this global recession and depression by, of course, including more LGBTI people. I have no idea what I stands for. Last time I checked, it was only LGBT. Of course, these things change daily. We're also going to achieve an economic recovery by gender parity and through things like taxation and inclusive design. It's amazing that such an intricate diagram with so many words can actually say so little. So this is their Great Reset agenda. And if you're saying to yourself right now, well, George, I don't really get it. It just seems like this overly vague word salad of just this drivel that doesn't mean anything. Go ahead and join the club. I am right there with you. But I don't think it's really about their agenda. I think it's about what's playing out behind the scenes. and what their true intentions actually are. For more on that, let's go right to an interview, a fantastic clip that I found from Joe Rogan interviewing one of my favorites, Brett Weinstein.
Equality of outcome, it's impossible. If you pursue it, you end up with a dystopia. And even if it were possible, it would not be desirable for the reasons you point to about the benefits of what you're calling competition.
But there are people in this world that do want to push towards an equality of outcome.
Yes.
And they make it sound as if this is not just logical, but ethical and possible in the future, and that you are on the wrong side of history if you think that capitalism and competition and all these things you just talked about are good, and that really the best thing is to force people to become some sort of utopian creature that works together in unison, and everybody is egalitarian, and there's no need for feminism and men's rights activists because everybody looks at everyone as an equal.
Well, there are two kinds of people who will advocate for equality of outcome. One kind of person who will is confused. They don't understand what happens if you go down this road. And the other one is cynical, and they're using this as an excuse to justify something that just so happens to reward them.
I couldn't agree with Brett more. So are Klaus and his cronies just confused, or are they using this as an excuse to further their own hidden agenda? I'll let you be the judge. Step number 2, the economic reality of the Great Reset. And we'll go ahead and take the tinfoil hat off. We'll leave that in step number 1. Although you gotta admit, Klaus and Mr. Bigglesworth, they sure look like they could come straight out of a James Bond movie. Be that evil villain from Spectre, that's for sure. But let's look at the economic impact of what they're proposing. We'll focus on that. We want to start by understanding that people are always going to pursue their own self-interest and the interest of their family. It's not to say they won't give to charity or be altruistic, but it is to say that they're going to prioritize their own self-interest and their family. Regardless of what culture I've experienced around the world, what ethnicity, it doesn't matter. People all fall into this category. It's hardwired into our brain, and it's not going to change. Also, I'd like to point out that the great Thomas Sowell always reminds us there are no solutions, only alternatives. Why is this? Because we're dealing with scarce resources that have alternative uses. And what I mean by this specifically is regardless of what you're doing, we always have to include a cost-benefit analysis. It's very easy to focus on the intentions of some regulation, laws, or programs and totally ignore the actual results. But all of the mumbo jumbo we heard in step number 1 really boils down to a couple things. Klaus and the cronies want to increase regulations and taxes. They're most likely also going to have this hiring quota, and everything needs to be green. So let's see how that plays out in a little simple example. We'll use Farmer Frank right here. He's got a plot of land. He's growing wheat, corn, some sort of food. And Klaus comes in and says, listen, Frank, from now on, you have to buy cyber tractors. No more of those diesel tractors you were buying from Caterpillar. So first, what this does is this allocates resources to something that was very efficient. And why do I say it was efficient? Because Frank was using it in the first place, and we know that Frank knows more about farming than Klaus and Mr. Bigglesworth ever will. So human ingenuity, materials, and capital all go into building these cyber tractors and get diverted from building something else that may have been more efficient. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't focus on green energy. What I am saying is that it should be based on market demand. It should be a bottoms-up approach, not tops-down. If it is top-down, most likely you're going to have this misallocation of resources that are very scarce, I'd like to point out. And then we've got this hiring quota. So over here, we've got Moody the millennial. And of course, it is they, because I don't know Moody's personal pronouns, but I do know that Moody does not like work. She's giving it a thumb, or they are giving it a thumbs down because they don't want to work in this field at all. But Farmer Frank has to hire them because he needs someone in the LGBTI community. I'm not sure if Moody is an L, a G, a B, a T, or an I, but the bottom line is they fit the category that Klaus and the cronies and Mr. Bigglesworth are laying out for Farmer Frank. But the one thing we do know for sure is that Moody is going to offer a lot less productivity than someone that Frank would hire based on merit alone. So what we have in this very simple example is we have a misallocation of scarce resources. We have less economic output, which is going to lead to a lower standard of living. Why is that? Because Frank can't produce as much wheat. If Frank can't produce as much food, that means someone else in the economy is going to have to start growing food. Well, that person could have done something else, such as become a doctor, become a scientist, an engineer that maybe could have worked on something like green energy, but now they can't because they're going to have to grow wheat or they're going to have to grow their own food. And I'd also like to point out that we're seeing this play out in real life right now with the cerveza sickness. We know what it looks like when economic activity goes down by 75, 95, 85%, whatever. It's not good. It gets really ugly really fast. And we just haven't seen the worst of it because, as you know, the Fed and the government have come in with all of their stimulus packages that will most likely be temporary. And if they are permanent, it's going to lead to an even worse outcome through inflation and a loss of purchasing power. But let me be crystal clear. I'm not saying that we shouldn't strive to have greener energy. I like breathing clean air for themselves to take action that will lead to those outcomes. We shouldn't try to force people into doing something, and we definitely shouldn't regulate them into doing that either. Also, sustainable. I hear this word all the time. And to be sustainable, we need to always remember that it has to be profitable. I think in today's day and age, we've completely forgot the concept of a business needing to actually make a profit. If we have these businesses that are zombie companies that are just feeding off the government, that's always going to come at the price of future taxation or inflation, and most likely a lower standard of living. But really the takeaway, it's got to be a bottoms-up type approach. You've got to convince individuals in the real economy to want to take these actions, and the entrepreneurs will satisfy those needs and wants. We can't have this tops-down approach, or the results are going to be even worse than what we have today, regardless of the intentions. And one more thing I'd like to point out for those of you watching this video who favor this type of tops-down approach in certain aspects of our economy. And the argument you always hear is that we can't rely on the entrepreneur because they're greedy, and we have to have some sort of public official in there that's actually benevolent and virtuous that we can rely on for the greater good of society. And I can tell you why this opinion is fundamentally flawed, but nobody does it better than Milton Friedman himself.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power within, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us.
So do you honestly think that Klaus and his buddies at the World Economic Forum are those angels that are going to lead us to this utopian future? Do you honestly think they're less greedy than those capitalists, or they're more virtuous? The only thing we're going to get from this great reset is more cronyism, more corporatism, and a lot less personal freedom. And that's if we don't have the tinfoil hat on. If we take that tinfoil hat, put it back on, it gets real crazy once you go down that rabbit hole. That is for sure, but we'll leave that for a separate video. Step number 3, what is the end game? How does this play out for ordinary people like you and me? I think their plan is to stagflate, tax, and lie. Everything else is just smoke and mirrors. It's a total cover-up and sham. And this is a fantastic way to sum it up. Got to give all the credit to my good buddy Jason Burke with Wall Street for Main Street. If you're not checking him out, make sure you do so. So there's a few things we know. Government debt is at all-time high. This is a huge problem, especially if you're a government official and you want to keep power. The World Economic Forum is a group of these government leaders that's been meeting since the 1970s. So of course they all know each other. They're trying to help each other out. It's the cronyism I was talking about before. And they're all in bed with Klaus and his creepy crew. This isn't about climate change. It's about increasing your taxes. It's not about equality. It's about increasing regulation on everyday people like you and I. It's about micromanaging everything. These global elites think that they're so much smarter than you that you can't make decisions on your own. It's not about increasing your living standards. It's about giving them more and more power. Don't be fooled. They care about any of these topics or your well-being. They care about one thing and one thing only. That is pursuing their own self-interest. We go back to this pictograph I used in step number 2 from Klaus's post, but now I've done it in a way that's far more accurate. Instead of his mumbo jumbo, we've got their real intentions. That's stagflate, tax, and lie. Let's dive into this a little deeper. We understand the details so we can connect the dots and see what's most likely coming down the pipeline for everyday people like you and I. We'll start with taxes. One way they've already increased them without you even knowing it, it's a combination of both tax and lie, leave it up to the government to pull that off, is through this 2018 bill that was passed. You think that it lowered your taxes. In short term, it might have, but long term, it's going to increase them. It's this tax bracket scam that nobody is talking about it. And I've gone over it in a few of my videos, but it's worth mentioning again. It's very important you understand how this works. Editor, go ahead and throw up the chart. What they've done is they've changed the way they measure inflation from something called the CPIU to the CCPIU. And of course, the CCPIU measures inflation at a lower rate than how it was measured before. Why is this important? Because it keeps tax brackets lower longer. So if your income is going up in nominal terms, so your purchasing power isn't increasing at all, you go to a higher and higher tax bracket. So they're stealing more and more of your income without you even knowing it. And this was baked into that 2018 tax bill that was sold to the general public as a way to lower their taxes, but of course, it's increasing your taxes long-term. Total scam. I also think they're gonna increase long-term capital gains to the same level as income. They're gonna increase the wealth tax, increase the exit tax, and they're definitely gonna increase property taxes at a local level if you live in one of these states or cities that are totally bust. And they're gonna lie the way they've always done it, through these bogus numbers with the CPI and the unemployment rate. Editor, go ahead and throw up the charts that we all know well from Shadow Stats. We look at the CPI, and if it was measured the same way today as it was back in the 1970s, the inflation rate for the last decade would be almost 10%. And unemployment, although they say it's at an all-time low, Shadow Stats would tell us a lot different. Now, I want to make sure everyone understands that Shadow Stats doesn't come up with their own formulas for CPI and unemployment. They just take the way the government themselves measured it back in the 70s and 80s and apply it to today. The only thing that's different is if you look at their metric that's above the government's U6 number, it includes people that haven't looked for a job for over a year. The government just pretends they don't exist, and they always have. But Shadow Stats, I think, accurately says, hey, these people are unemployed as well. And then it goes back to the GDP growth. Of course, we hear that this is the greatest economy ever. We've never seen anything like it because all of these statistics, like unemployment, are so fantastic. But if we actually adjusted for the correct CPI, although nominal GDP growth would be the same, real GDP growth would be flat, if not negative, going all the way back to the GFC. Now let's move on to stagflate. If you're one of these governments with this massive debt load, how do you get rid of it? You can either default or you can try to inflate it away. But they're looking at Japan and Europe and saying to themselves, well, they've had negative interest rates, they've done all this quantitative easing, and they still can't get inflation up high enough to reduce the debt load. So they're paying it back with cheaper currency units. Or the easiest way to look at it is they're not increasing their tax receipts faster than they're increasing the amount of money they're spending. In order to get the type of inflation they need to really reduce the debt burden, they know they've got to increase M2 money supply and velocity. There's a lot of things that go into inflation, but these are the two big components. So how do you do this if you're one of these governments? The first thing you can do is UBI, because you know that quantitative easing done through a central bank, the old way of doing it, the old school way back in 2008, 2009, only increases bank reserves, and that just goes into assets, doesn't necessarily increase the amount of inflation. It may or may not. So what you need to do is get cash in the back pocket of the everyday individual that's going to go out there and spend it very quickly. This increases M2 and velocity. Of course, UBI accomplishes this goal, but what you could do to take it a step further, which I definitely think they'll do, is ban cash. So you could put this app on your phone. I've talked about it many times. The Fed or the government transfers these currency units, we'll call them Fed coins, to this app. You have to go out there and spend it within a certain time frame, or poof, it's gone off your phone. This is a way they can increase the money supply and increase the rate at which you spend the money. And those of you paying very close attention might be saying to yourself, yeah, George, I get it. They're increasing UBI, they're banning cash, they're doing these things, but that'll most likely increase the deficits even higher. How does that get rid of the debt? Insert MMT. They believe the government can spend money, or even should spend money, without issuing treasuries at all. So if you can spend money like a drunken sailor and you don't have to issue debt, your debt never goes up. It's magical how that works. And we look at the supply side of the equation. If you've got money increasing, you've got velocity increasing, the last thing that you can do to really stoke inflation is reduce the amount of goods and services that are being created in the real economy. One way to do this is to deglobalize. So all those supply chains that were overseas, bring them back home. Another thing you can do is increase the unemployment rate. Usually this would be on the demand side of the equation, but if you're providing everyone with more money than they were actually making at their job to stay home and do nothing, then the demand side stays the same, if not increases, while the supply side continues to shrink, because people aren't even going into work to produce these goods and services. All these businesses are going bust. And it makes one really start to ponder, how would the global elite, or how would you take this tops-down approach? How would you control it if you were Klaus, if you wanted to deglobalize and get unemployment higher? That's a hard thing to achieve. But it's exactly what we had with the cerveza sickness. So is the cerveza sickness just some random, unfortunate event that just happens to increase unemployment dramatically, most likely long term, and create this narrative, this push for deglobalization? I have no idea. But what I do know is it's extremely convenient for these global elite that are trying to push this great reset agenda, which I think is all about reducing government debt. What this means for you and me, the average Joe and Jane, is they're going to try to steal our purchasing power, the purchasing power of our children and grandchildren, through taxation and inflation. They're going to try to take away the little freedom we have left, and they're going to try to seize as much power as they possibly can. Because like Milton Friedman says, they are just as greedy, if not more greedy, that's what I would argue, than these corporate CEOs, and they're definitely not benevolent, nor are they virtuous. And on that note, I had to change Klaus's quote that he used in his post to never let a good crisis go to waste. I think that is far more appropriate, and after watching this video, I think you would agree. So is this plan about climate equality and increasing the living standard for everyone in the world? Is it about reducing government debt through stagflate, tax, and lie? Or is it about something far more sinister? What are your spidey senses telling you? Let's take one last look at these global elite at the World Economic Forum who want to impose this great reset agenda on all of us. And I'll let you be the judge of their true intentions.
Now is the historical moment, the time. We need a great reset.
History would look at this crisis as the great opportunity for reset.
It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world.
For more content that'll help you build wealth and thrive in a world of out-of-control central banks and big governments, check out this playlist right here, and I will see you on the next video.
The following is a conversation with Vitalik Buterin, co-creator of and author of the white paper that launched Ethereum and Ether, which is a cryptocurrency.
last week, on March 20th, I made this video. Cash stimulus to Americans. How? By checks? No, it's crypto. Well, things really started to get interesting. During the night on March 23rd, news started to be released that the stimulus bills for economic relief here in America contain language about creating a digital dollar. CoinDesk brought the news. House stimulus bills envision digital dollar to ease coronavirus recession. And according to the article, under the draft bill shared last week, dubbed the Take Responsibility for Workers and Families Act and the Financial Protections and Assistance for America's Consumers, States, Businesses, and Vulnerable Populations Act, the Federal Reserve, the nation's central bank, could use a digital dollar and digital wallets to send payments to qualified individuals, consisting of $1,000 for minors and $2,000 to legal adults. Well, that news cycle, it went quick, because by yesterday, the 24th, one of the bills removed the digital dollar language. Just 10 hours later from their first article, CoinDesk posted this one, digital dollar stripped from latest U.S. coronavirus relief bill. And in the article, the latest version of the Take Responsibility for Workers and Family Act, revealed late Monday, does not contain any language around a digital dollar in its section on direct stimulus payments. I wonder why it was removed so quickly. Why was it in there in the first place? Well, the newest draft of the bill is much more vague, how people will be paid, which starts on page 1090. It's just non-specific and there's just amounts named, but not how the payments are coming through, a check, debit card, or digitally. Although there is that other bill, the Financial Protections and Assistance for Americans Consumers, States, Businesses, and Vulnerable Populations Act. Here is that bill, and as we can see, it will require member banks to maintain pass-through digital dollar wallets for certain persons and for other purposes. And if we search by the term digital, it is found 35 times throughout this bill. Now, this one isn't proposing creating a digital crypto dollar, but a digitized version of the existing dollar. According to the draft, the digital dollar will be dollar balances consisting of digital ledger entries recorded as liabilities in the accounts of any Federal Reserve bank. So it would be on a digital ledger, as the bill says, consisting of digital ledger entries, which means they would be using a blockchain, most likely a private consortium chain, fully controlled by the Fed and its member organization. But here's what is interesting. Going back to that CoinDesk article about the first bill being stripped of its digital dollar language, they mention this bill at the end and say it still mentions the digital dollar, although that language is expected to be removed from that bill as well, according to a source familiar with the matter. So once again, why was it introduced to only be stripped in the blink of an eye? We can't just blink and let the fact that they were planning on doing it slip right by, as I'm sure that is exactly why they did it. The elite accidentally revealed their ultimate plans, and things are going to get hairy. Let me try to explain why. So the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, they are the agency that ensures your deposits in the bank will actually be there. And this FDIC isn't the Fed, it's a completely independent agency. The FDIC is the primary federal regulator of banks that are not chartered by the states and that do not join the Federal Reserve System, aka they regulate the private banks. And you know what? They were created in response to bank failures and the bank runs during the Great Depression, as there was a desperate scramble for cash, a liquidity crunch, and a failing stock market. Sound similar to what is going on right about now? Well, that old FDIC tweeted this yesterday. Forget the mattress. Keeping large sums of cash at home is risky. The best place to protect your money is in an FDIC-insured bank where it's safe and sound. Learn how the FDIC safeguards your money. Well, let's just learn from FDIC Chairman Jelena McWilliams.
We're living in unprecedented times. At a time of a pandemic like this, it is way too easy to get confused and to have fear about what you should be doing with your money in your accounts, especially as you're looking at the volatility in the stock market and the financial sector. This is what I would like you to take away from this. Your money is safe at the banks. The last thing you should be doing is pulling your money out of the banks now, thinking that it's going to be safer someplace else. You don't want to be walking around with large wads of cash, and you certainly don't want to be hoarding cash in your mattress. It didn't pan out well for so many people. And I will tell you this, no depositor has lost a penny of their insured deposits since 1933, when the FDIC was created. So if you're talking about having your money in a safe place, please keep it in an FDIC insured bank.
So to me, that reeks of desperation, basically begging you to keep your dollars with the banks. And so why would they do this? Because they know a bank run is coming. The banks across America don't have and never have the deposits to fulfill an American population withdrawal. And that is why I personally think we should not count out the digital dollar. You gotta realize something. The head of the Treasury Department, Steve Mnuchin Snoochie Boochies, just brought on somebody interesting to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. What is this branch? Well, it serves to charter, regulate, and supervise all national banks, the federally licensed branches and agencies of foreign banks in the United States. Basically regulates what the FDIC doesn't. So, back in 2017, when Steve Mnuchin was brought in as the Treasury Secretary, he was bringing in some friends with him who worked at One West Bank. Yeah, that bank, formerly Indy Mac, who Steve bought after the financial crisis. He changed its name and then was accused of highly unethical foreclosures, including on elderly and widows. So who did he bring on? According to this CNBC article, back when he was nominated, people familiar with the discussions, the Trump administration is considering 2 of his deputies to head key regulatory agencies, former One West General Counsel Brian Brooks for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and former One West Chief Executive Joseph Otting for the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Joseph Otting, he made it. He was sworn in shortly after, and he is currently the most powerful person in the banking industry as the Comptroller of the Currency. But Brian Brooks, yeah, we remember him. We talked about him a few days ago. He didn't get the position for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So what did Brian go do? He went to Coinbase, became their chief legal officer, and created the roadmap for the USDC, Coinbase's digital dollar. So when I made that video last week about Brian leaving Coinbase and joining the Office of the Comptroller as their chief operating officer, I didn't realize Brian was best friends with Steve and Joseph at One West. These guys have worked together really freaking closely, going back to that group One West photo. There is Brian and there is Joseph. So what is going on? Why was Brian suddenly brought on after his short stint at Coinbase after creating a stablecoin? What was he even doing there? Well, here's where things start to get wonky and not make full sense, but I will try to wrap it up towards the end. Here are Steve Mnuchin's words in December on a Fed coin, like a digital dollar. Let's listen in.
Okay, but the Chinese have decided to get into this as well. And so the last half of my question was, there's been some thought process about the Fed getting into it and having their own digital currency. Is this something you see necessary, something you don't want to get into, something that shouldn't be out there? Where do you see this going?
So again, I would differentiate what China is doing from what a Bitcoin or a Facebook would do. What China is doing is really issuing digital currency in lieu of physical cash, and they can track all that. So they will be able to track where that goes. That's different than a Bitcoin. It's no different than in the U.S. If money is sent on the Fed wire system, it can be tracked, and money through SWIFT has identifiers. So again, I would differentiate kind of what central banks are doing from what a Libra or a Bitcoin is doing. As it relates to the Fed, and Chair Powell and I have discussed this at length, I think we both agree for the near future, in the next 5 years, we see no need for the Fed to issue digital currency. And that's because, again, we have a very sophisticated system. The Fed is working on electronic payment system. We need to make sure they're real-time electronic payment system in the U.S., but thank you for your concern.
So Steve says no way to a Fed coin, not in the next 5 years, but his buddy is working in the private sector, being a strong advocate for crypto and stablecoins. For example, just a month before Steve's public words, in November of 2019, Brian authored this Fortune magazine piece, A Digital Dollar for a Strong United States Financial System. Let's just read some of his own words. The time has come for a tokenized version of the dollar, and it's not just for those of us in the cryptocurrency world who think so. In recent months, senior U.S. officials have been exploring the idea of minting greenbacks on the distributed ledger software known as blockchain. The idea appears inevitable. The only question is who should create the digital dollar, the government or the private sector. He then explains top Fed officials in Congress were pushing for it. Chris Giancarlo, former CFTC head, is a strong advocate, and I like what he says here. The timing of these considerations is not coincidental, and it reflects new challenges to America's role as a linchpin of the global financial system. Brian then explains the path forward. The true question facing our policymakers is whether our government needs to create the digital dollar, or whether the private sector can do so effectively. The best path forward is one that harnesses our country's remarkable capacity for innovation, and also reflects government's historical practice of setting broad guide rails for private innovation within the financial system. That means letting innovators invent and letting the government regulate. In short, the private sector should build the technology, and the public sector should set monetary policy. Crazy words from a guy that is the second most powerful person now in the banking industry. But let's just get back to Steve, because he has had more recent words about cryptocurrency. In February, during the House hearing on the 2021 budget, just a month before, he brought Brian onto his new position.
How does your department, Mr. Secretary, plan to respond to this rapidly evolving technology of cryptocurrency and other digital assets?
Well, thank you, and as you've commented, we're very supportive of bringing the Secret Service back home to the Treasury where it started and the efficiencies of having it together. We're spending a lot of time on the issue of cryptocurrencies and digital payment systems. It's a crucial area. And there's a lot of different things that get grouped together into this one area, so let me just be brief. But on pure cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and there are others, we want to make sure that these are not used as the equivalent of secret bank accounts. So we are working with FinCEN, and we will be rolling out new regulations to be very clear on greater transparency so that law enforcement can see where the money is going and that this isn't used for money laundering. There is another component of the market which people refer to as stable coins, where we do think technology can be used to reduce payment processing quite considerably, particularly for small dollar payments cross-border. And then there's a third component that people are looking at, which is central bank digital issued currency. That is something that Chair Powell and I do not think the U.S. needs to consider now, but could consider again down the road.
Doesn't it seem like Minucci, Snoochie, Boochies might just be warming up to crypto? And he specifically brought up stablecoins like USDC, of which Brian has worked on. So, my friends, if the government gets back into a stimulus funding bill corner, which day by day seems more likely, are they going to rely on private sector technology like USDC and Coinbase to issue the payment? Steve's good buddy Brian says that's the way to go. And let's just replay what he said about stablecoins.
There is another component of the market which people refer to as stable coins, where we do think technology can be used to reduce payment processing quite considerably, particularly for small dollar payments.
Yep, stablecoins could be used to reduce processing times for smaller dollar payments. And then let's just hear what Steve said recently about getting money to Americans.
We're looking at sending checks to Americans immediately. And what we've heard from hardworking Americans, many companies have now shut down, whether it's bars or restaurants. Americans need cash now, and the president wants to get cash now. And I mean now, in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, in just 2 weeks. And that was a week ago. You got 7 days left, 1 freaking week. The traditional system will be impossible if they want speed. Next week, in 2 weeks, hell, even if in a month. And partnering with the private sector may be the only way.
And to control your life and the economy. This is something they're calling the Great Reset Agenda. I've done a couple videos on it before. I'll put links in the description below. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into what this really means. What are their objectives and how will it impact your life in the future? I'm gonna explain this to you in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, let's go over their disturbing utopian vision. And this is gonna get really bizarre here. It seems like something out of a sci-fi movie, but of course, I'm gonna back it up with data from their website. By the time we get to step number 3, and we put all these pieces of the puzzle together, it is definitely gonna be time to pour yourself that stiff drink. So let's dive right into it. They have a blog post that came out in 2016, 2017 that I think really summarizes their vision for 2030. So in the next 10 years, what will the United States look like? And the title of this blog post, and I'm not making this up, we're gonna go to the blog post and I'll show you, is I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. And there's a clip that's been going around Twitter that shows exactly what they're referencing. It's this guy who's smiling, the sun is shining, and he says, I own nothing, and I am happy. Editor, let's go ahead and throw up that clip. So basically, this vision they have for the future is everything is controlled by artificial intelligence. I'm calling it the AI brain cloud, or ABC for short. They need something catchy that everyone can remember. It's just like your ABCs. So all the data from all the individuals, whether it's coming from their smartphone or a chip implanted into their brain, and I know this is tinfoil hat stuff, but it's right on their website. We're gonna check it out in just a moment. All this data is going to the cloud, this AI brain. And from there, it's making all the decisions. It's pointing people in the direction of whether they want to stay in a house, whether they need drones to take them goods and services, whether flying cars, not making this up, comes and picks people up just like an Uber would now. But basically, their vision for your future is to control your life and the economy through central planning and artificial intelligence, robotics, and everything going into the cloud. Big data is going to tell us how we need to allocate resources in the real economy. More on that in step number 3. And I know this sounds completely outrageous, so before we go any further, let's check out the blog post I was referring to, their vision of the future entitled, I Own Nothing, Have No Privacy, and Life Has Never Been Better.
I want to first point out a couple things. Number one, they changed their title. The original title, like I said, was Welcome to 2030, I Own Nothing, Have No Privacy, and Life Has Never Been Better. And I have to go to Forbes to find their original article, because now when you look at it on the World Economic Forum's own website, you can see they've changed the title to Here's How Life Could Change in My City by the year 2030. So obviously, they had so much pushback on this, they had to change the title. And further evidence, they got a lot of negative pushback on this, that they put in a disclaimer saying this isn't their vision. They just want to open this up for discussion. But that was never, ever a part of the original document. This is like Jerome Powell coming out in September of 2019 and telling everybody, this is not QE.
This is not QE.
When he knows, everyone at the Fed knows, the marketplace, and even the average Joe knows darn well that's exactly what it is. The other thing I wanted to point out is this article was written by an actual adult. And I know that sounds funny, but wait till we get in and start reading some of what they said. It was written by Ida Auken, who is a member of parliament in Denmark. And it's completely shocking that this wasn't written by a 7-year-old. Let's get into the article. Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city. Or should I say our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. Of course, based on what she defines as needs. One by one, all these things became free. So it ended up not making sense for us to own much. So you don't own anything, and things are free. Sounds a little bit like communism, but more on that in just a moment. It made no sense for us to own cars anymore, because we could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys within minutes. Now I can hardly believe we accepted congestion and traffic jams, not to mention the air pollution from those combustion engines. What were we thinking? And this is where it starts to get really bizarre. And keep in mind, this is not only an adult writing this, but this is a member of Parliament in Denmark and a member of the World Economic Forum that's summarizing their views on the future. Sometimes I use my bike when I go see my friends. And it's interesting, she owns a bike, but she can't own anything else, not even clothes. I enjoy the exercise and the ride. It kind of gets the soul to come along with the journey. Funny how some things never seem to lose their excitement. Walking, biking, cooking, drawing, and even growing plants. It makes perfect sense and reminds us of how our culture emerged from a close relationship with nature. Now things go from bizarre and creepy to nightmarish. In our city, we don't pay any rent because someone else is using our free space whenever we don't need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I'm not there. Once in a while, I will choose to cook for myself. It's easy. The necessary kitchen equipment is delivered at my door within minutes. Since transportation became free, we stopped having all those things stuffed into our home. Why keep a pasta maker and a crate cooker crammed into your cupboards? We can just order them when we need them. And here's where we go right to the twilight zone. Shopping? I can't really remember what that is. For most of us, it has been turned into choosing things to use. Sometimes I find this fun, and sometimes I just want the algorithm to do it for me. It knows my taste better than I do by now. So remember, all your thoughts and decision-making are going straight into the cloud, into ABC, Artificial Intelligence Brain Cloud. And now we go from Twilight Zone straight into Hunger Games. My biggest concern is all the people who do not live in our city, those we lost on the way, those who decided that it became too much, all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs, those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. I want to repeat that. Those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kind of lives outside the city in District 12. Some have formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. And now we go from Hunger Games straight into Orwell's 1984. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere, everything I do think, and dream is being recorded.
Okay, I'll give you a moment just to kind of shake off the creepiness, and then we'll go over what that would look like right here on the dry erase board. AI, brain cloud, like I said earlier, or ABC, you gotta know your ABCs. There would be a chip in everyone's brain that was transmitting signals into ABC at all times. It would also be on their phone, so all the transactions they did would go into ABC as well. They didn't talk about this specifically in the article, but in reading through the World Economic Forum's website, you see it mentioned in there constantly. So all of this data is going into the cloud, ABC, and then it's making decisions, because of course it's way smarter than any human being or group of human beings could ever be. And then it's making decisions as to how resources are being allocated in the real economy. So we've got this guy here that's just thinking, I need a car. That goes right into ABC, and ABC sends a flying car out to pick him up. And remember, she talked about it in the blog post. I'm not making this up. Or we've got Prozac Paula. She is just so happy riding her bike with her daisies in the basket. She's got these spiral eyes, of course, just like a zombie. But she's thinking, I would love pasta. So AI Brain Cloud takes the drone and it sends it over to, we're not gonna call it her house because she doesn't really own it. We'll call it the house. And the drone takes her everything that she needs to make a pasta dinner. And just a quick FYI, I think Prozac Paula is actually on the parliament in Denmark. Who knew? So these guys are hanging out in the smart house. Joe, Moody the millennial, and heroin guy. He's from one of my last videos, or I like to refer to him as the US economy. He is passed out there with his heroin needle. Who knows what's dripping out of that? But all these people just thought to themselves, I would like a house to be in right now. So ABC just opened up the door and sent them the coordinates on their cell phone. They just walked right over and walked right into the house. Wouldn't that be fun to go back to a house from a hard day of work, walk in and have all these random people laying around your couch and some guy on heroin having convulsions in the corner? That sounds like utopia to me for sure. Oh, but wait, there is more. It gets better. Prozac Paula rides her bike over to the house, walks over everybody, goes upstairs and takes a nap. But while she's dreaming, all of her thoughts are going into ABC. See, she's dreaming ABC is great, ABC is good. So ABC knows that, and he's very appreciative. So he sends the drone over to her house to drop off a sweater that says, ABC is my co-pilot. Very, very nice. But remember, there are some people that Ida is really, really worried about because they may look at this system and say, I want nothing to do with that. That would be me. But where do they go? Well, they have to live out in the forest and all the dirt. And I really feel sorry for them, Ida was saying. I'm sure Prozac Paula would feel the same. But they have their own property and they have to grow their own food and trade back between one another. They have internal combustion engines like these trucks that ride around. And they can, let's take your friend and family. Internal combustion engines like these trucks that ride around, and they can even make their own decisions. Ooh, yuck, who could stand doing that? They can choose the color of their truck, or I'd like to point out, they could also have a cyber truck from Tesla, something green and something electrical. But all these people in District 12, we'll call it, they're the cretins, the outcasts. Maybe we'll even call them the rebels that don't appreciate just how good life can be when you're living under a system where you own nothing and have absolutely no privacy. But of course, you know what this system is called. It's communism. Communism is basically where you have no private property. Capitalism is where you have private property. That's for all those rubes and rebels that live in District 12. And I want to point out, a lot of people go back and forth on Twitter or in the comments of my YouTube videos and say, well, the Fed is part of capitalism because it's a privately owned entity. And that may be true, but when I'm referring to capitalism, what I am a proponent of is free market capitalism, not just capitalism. You have to have the free market component. So when you add that into the description, the Fed and the central planners are the antithesis of free market capitalism. But let's go to some quotes to really prove my point about how this, what I describe on the whiteboard, and what Prozac Paula, or Ida, was describing in her blog post is just straight communism. And this is a quote from Karl Marx. The theory of the communist may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. And there's one thing we know for sure. The global elites at the World Economic Forum definitely want to abolish private property. Step number 2, if you own nothing, well then who on earth will own everything? I think you guessed it. The government, of course. And I know last step was really some sci-fi, tinfoil hat, crazy stuff, but right from the World Economic Forum's own website. So now let's get into the economics. How would this work? How would the government go from being $27 trillion in debt to owning absolutely everything, or at least the vehicles and the housing, according to this blog post? We have to start by thinking through what would happen if we had a GFC 2.0, what we should have had back in March if the Fed and the government would not have stepped in and taken all of these artificial measures to prop up the market. Going back to 2008, if you recall, the automakers got absolutely destroyed to the point where they had to receive bailouts or they would have gone bankrupt. And the housing market went down by 50%. But now it's different. In 2020, corporate debt is at all-time highs. The balance sheets are far worse than they were back in 2008. Also, consumer debt, very close to an all-time high. And we know housing prices are definitely at all-time highs in most major markets in the United States. People have been using those just like ATMs, like they did in 2006. Our whole entire economy is built on asset prices, debt, and confidence. And really, it's all about asset bubbles. And if you don't believe me, just think through what would happen if asset prices in the United States went down by 50% and just stayed there. Our economy is 70% consumption. How much consumption is a result of high asset prices? I would argue a good majority of it. So if a lot of these corporations were going bust and the average Joe was losing their home because they couldn't afford to make the payments, then that would give an opportunity for the Fed to come in and buy up those assets to once again try to prop up these markets. And right about now, your friend and family member Fred is stepping in and says, George, you are crazy. We saw what happened back in March. The Fed and the government are never going to let asset prices go down again. One thing I would point out to your friend and family member Fred is the case study of Japan back in 1990. This is a chart from 1986 all the way to 2010 of the Japanese real estate market. It peaks way up here at 220 in 1990 and then comes all the way down over the span of the next 15 years. 15 years. It goes down and down and down and down. And I'd like to point out the Japanese stock market is also lower today than it was in 1990. And the reason I use Japan as an example is because they've done everything the Fed and the government is currently doing. We're about 10 years ahead of Japan. They've done QE infinity. They've had negative interest rates. They've purchased stocks, all these ETFs like the Fed did back in March. Japan has been there and done that. They bought 60% of the JGBs, the Japanese government debt. Everything that we would do in the future, most likely, Japan has already done. In spite of this, their real estate market has gone down for 15 years, and their stock market is lower today than it was in 1990. And you also may be saying to yourself, yeah, George, the Fed and the government are going to come in and print so much money that we're going to get consumer price inflation, and that's going to keep assets elevated. But let's go back and remember the 1970s, stagflation, the definition of stagflation. The stock market between 1972 and 1974 went down by almost 50% in nominal terms, not adjusted for inflation. So when you actually adjust for the rate of inflation, purchasing power, they went down by a lot more than just 50%. So my point is asset prices can go down while money printing and consumer prices are going up. So what would happen if we saw something like that in the United States, an economy that is completely propped up by asset prices? The answer is the average Joe and the corporations would be desperate to sell to anyone. So the Fed comes in and says, yep, I'm your buyer. They go to average Joe, they buy his home, and they give Joe bank reserves because now Joe has a bank account with the Fed. More on that in step number 3. And guys like Elon Musk come along here with his hover shoes, his electronically powered hover shoes that are made from diesel, uranium, and baby seals. Very green and eco-friendly, I might add. He floats on in smoking something, I'm not sure. And he says, yes, Fed, I will sell Tesla to you. So Tesla and all the auto manufacturers go onto the Fed's balance sheet. Most people's homes go onto the Fed's balance sheet. But remember, the societal narrative and the political narrative right now is leaning towards MMT. And I rarely make predictions. I just try to give you information so you can come to your own conclusions. But one thing I do predict, and that is we will see MMT in the near future. It's really not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So your drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam, who's holding a sign that says, I love MMT, for obvious reasons, because he can buy more of your votes, comes in and merges the government with the Fed. So the two balance sheets become one. Whoa, time out. I want to give you a quick fun fact regarding MMT and the merger of these balance sheets. Who did President Biden, or President Harris, elect as the Treasury Secretary? None other than Janet Yellen, who is the former head of what? the Federal Reserve. In other words, the person that was in charge of the Fed's balance sheet is now in charge of the government's balance sheet. Perfect person to have in the position if you wanted to merge the balance sheets. Currently, the Fed has treasuries, government debt, as an asset on their balance sheet, and bank reserves, funny money that they print or just create electronic digits and accounts of guys like Average Joe, Elon Musk, and the banks under the Fed's umbrella. The government has those same treasuries as liabilities on their balance sheet, and you ask what their assets are, the answer is not much. They've got about 3.8 trillion in assets against 27 trillion in debt. So they are wildly insolvent, which is why I call this guy not only your Uncle Sam, but your insolvent Uncle Sam. So these two balance sheets merge, which is interesting because if the assets and the liabilities of both of these entities become one, it's basically like doing a debt jubilee. And of course, all the assets, like Tesla and the Average Joe's house, would become an asset of the government. This is how they would own everything. And if you think this is a far-fetched idea, I would just ask you, how far-fetched do you think MMT is in the future? Editor, let's go right to the internet. This is from an article titled Primer, MMT and Abolishing Government Bond Issuance. The starting point for MMT macroeconomics is to use the accounting procedure of consolidation, combining the balance sheets of the central bank and the fiscal arm of the government, the Treasury of the United States. So just to recap, this is how it works. The economy comes crashing down, we'll call it GFC 2.0, and the government and the Fed can't prop up asset prices, or maybe they choose not to prop up asset prices. And all of these desperate sellers go to the Fed and sell their assets, the houses and all the car manufacturers. They go onto the balance sheet of the Fed, and then because MMT is so popular, they merge the two balance sheets. So the Fed's balance sheet and the government's balance sheet becomes one. So basically we have a debt jubilee, the treasuries are canceled out, and all the assets on the Fed's balance sheet, including Tesla and the homes, become assets of the government. You own nothing, they own everything, and life has never been better. Step number 3, the global elite's utopian endgame. And I want to be very clear before we get into this. This is not a prediction. What I'm doing is I'm explaining things. I'm going to the World Economic Forum's website. I'm figuring out, in their words, what their goals are for the future, how they see the future playing out. Then I'm taking my knowledge of macroeconomics and how the system actually works. I'm combining the two, and then I'm trying to put myself in their shoes, as scary as that may sound, and figure out if I had these objectives, how would I achieve them? And this is how I would get it done. First, we have to understand the importance of price signals. They give us a ton of data, and most people don't understand how vital they are to running an efficient economy and allocating scarce resources with alternative uses. To help me out with this, we're going to use the other end, or the other side of my whiteboard. Like I said the other day, we're getting real professional here on the George Gammon YouTube channel. We're just going to flip this, hopefully, to the other side without me smashing my fingers like I've done about 10 times this morning. All right, here we have a beautiful drawing of the United States. And up in, we'll say, Canada, maybe the border up in Oregon, Washington, they're growing all of this lumber. This lumber is a scarce resource with an alternative use. And I'm getting that term directly from my favorite economist, Thomas Sowell. So up in the Northwest, we have a lumber mill, and we have KB Homes. They're a big manufacturer of housing in the United States. So let's say we have all this housing in Denver. The prices are going up. We also have housing in Detroit, and prices are going down. Everyone is leaving Detroit for Denver. This is where all the jobs are being created, let's say, in this example. Therefore, we don't need any more housing stock in Detroit. We're oversupplied. That's why prices are going down. And we need more housing stock in Denver. That's why prices are going up. It's simple supply and demand. KB Homes recognizes this because they see the prices going up and down. So they order 2x4s, these chopped up trees, resources from the lumber mill. And KB Homes allocates those scarce resources, the 2x4s, to Denver. It does not allocate them to Detroit. The whole reason they're able to do this efficiently is because the data they get from the price signals. If they didn't have access to the data, they would inadvertently continue to transfer resources over to Detroit, and those resources would be wasted. Another way to think through the importance of prices in a very simple way. We have 3 resources. We'll call them the black resource, the blue one, and the red one. There's a lot more of the blue one than there is the red one. Therefore, the price is lower. There's more supply. So what this tells the marketplace is when they're building a home, let's say, they want to try to use more of the blue resource than they use of the red resource. Because of private property, we'll get to that in a moment, and private ownership of KB Homes, they want to make as much profit as possible. They want to avoid loss. Therefore, they're going to utilize the resource that is more prevalent, and and they're going to try to avoid using the resource that is more scarce. This is why the free market and free market capitalism, going back to what we talked about in step number 1, is the most efficient way to allocate scarce resources. It revolves around prices, but for price discovery to actually work, we have to have private property. And going back to step number 2, you know that private property makes the World Economic Forum, IDA, and our boy Klaus Schwab right here, who's the head of the World Economic Forum, it makes all of them very, very angry. Even Klaus Schwab's cat, Mr. Bigglesworth. If you're not familiar with Klaus Schwab, he is the head of the World Economic Forum and the one who is really pushing this great reset agenda. Editor, go ahead and throw up a clip for the viewer. I think you will see in about 2 seconds why I think he should be a part of Spectre, maybe more appropriately, Dr. Evil and Mr. Bigglesworth.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight the real virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. In short, we need a great reset.
A true, real-life James Bond villain for sure. But when we talk about the importance of prices, I want you to realize I'm not just making this up. This is not something that I think would be great. And to understand that further, let's go right to the internet and check out one of my favorite websites, one that you should be reading all the time, Mises.org.
In an unhampered market economy, the price mechanism is the tool conducive to the most efficient desired by consumers and allocation of resources. Why? Because prices stem from the different subjective value human beings attach to the various consumer goods and services available in the economy. By repeatedly exchanging or buying and selling goods and services, sellers discover the value subjectively attached to consumption goods by demanders. The market value of goods. In other words, they understand which consumer values any single available good most, thus allowing each good to find the most eager owner. And this is what we were just referring to in the example of lumber being allocated to either Denver or Detroit. Notice that subjective appraisement of goods value is possible if and only if goods are privately owned by the exchanging agents. And this is what Klaus doesn't want. They want us to own nothing. In fact, without private ownership of goods, exchanging agents could not enjoy the profit rewarding the discovery of the most eager buyers of the goods they want to exchange on the market. They would not be able to attain the highest possible reward for the exchange. Also, absent private ownership of goods, exchanging agents could not possibly experience losses. And this is why I always say that we have to let businesses go out of business. Taking it a step further, let's go to an article titled Price Signals as Guides for Resource Allocation. The market economy depends on price signals to correctly allocate its scarce resources. Scarce resources should command higher prices than more abundant resources. Guided by correct price signals, resource users will use scarce resources with higher prices for only high value purposes, and abundant resources with lower prices for lower value purposes. And here's the key takeaway right here, guys. If prices are absent or set incorrectly, resource users will waste resources by using scarce resources for lower value purposes and leaving abundant resources underutilized. That makes it crystal clear why the government and the Fed completely destroy the economy by meddling with their top-down, centrally planned approach. A great example of this is the government back in 2008 or prior to 2008, where they were pushing everybody to go into a home. That increased the prices of homes artificially, therefore an oversupply. We wasted scarce resources. As a result, we built too many homes. That was a result, mainly, of the government coming in and artificially getting people into homes that otherwise could not afford them. Also, let's think about the Fed dropping interest rates to zero for almost 10 years. What did that allow? A boom in the shale industry that otherwise most likely would have been unprofitable. Therefore, the supply of oil goes up, and the price goes down. Therefore, the economy utilizes more than it otherwise would have. The economy gets distorted on artificially cheap resources. If you're a greenie or someone way on the left, you should hate the Fed and the government coming in and distorting prices just as much as those free market loving Austrians. Now that we've got our head around that, let's take it right back to focusing on the utopian endgame of Klaus Bigglesworth, Ida, and the global elite at the World Economic Forum. We totally understand why communism failed. There were no price signals, therefore the government had no data to distribute to the individual farmers, in this case we use a simple economy, that produced cows, corn, and cotton. They didn't know how much to grow, therefore wasting resources, the economy collapses. And I think the global elites are smart enough to figure that out. So taking everything they have on their website, all of the information and what they are saying themselves, combining that with what I know about macroeconomics and what the social and political trends are right now, this is how I would connect the dots. This is what I think they will push more and more into the future, headed towards their socialist or communist utopia they want to achieve by 2030. So it all starts
with the Fed and the government. They have merged the balance sheets through MMT, like we discussed in step number 2. They've hired Janet Yellen, someone with experience with the Fed's balance sheet, now managing the Treasury's balance sheet, a perfect person to manage the merger. Then they come in with the Banking for All Act. We've all heard about this. This is where the individuals, the average Joe and Janes, and the businesses in the economy will have an account held at the Fed. Now it'll be held at the Treasury or the government. So all of the transactions from the average Joe's cell phone, the data in real time, will go straight to the government. And if I was Klaus, how I would do it is I would take that data and I would shoot it straight over to ABC, Artificial Intelligence Brain Cloud. I would have ABC crunch all of that data in milliseconds and then spit out directions to all of the individuals producing goods and services in the real economy. Whether they were humans or robots or maybe humans controlled by that chip in the brain, who knows how crazy the World Economic Forum really is. And let's not forget, all of the average Joe's thoughts, dreams, and vital statistics are going into ABC in addition to the data that's happening with all the transactions occurring in the real economy. This gives ABC all the mega amounts of data needed to tell the farmers how much they should grow. Whether it's soybeans, you say, George, what happened to the cows? Well, in 2030, we're all going to be vegetarians according to the World Economic Forum. And no, I'm not joking. Editor, throw up the clip. It tells them how much corn to grow and cotton. And you may be asking another question, why is my cotton in triangles? Very perceptive of you. It's because ABC doesn't like anything to be created in his own image. So the signal goes out here to grow more, grow less, and grow the same amount. So in the minds of the global elite, I think they see AI as a better way to allocate scarce resources with alternative uses. So if I'm the global elites, I see this as a solution to the problem that free market capitalism already solves. But in their eyes, they hate private property. They hate free market capitalism. Therefore, they can't have prices. So how do you get to the communist utopian state without all of the necessary evils of free market capitalism? It's the Fed coin, it's the Banking for All Act, artificial intelligence, and it goes right back to you will own nothing, have no privacy, and according to them, life will never be better. And right about now, your friend and family member Fred is going, George, what are you talking about? You crazy Austrians and your tinfoil hats. You don't know what's going on. The World Economic Forum is awesome. They're our friends. They don't want any type of system like you've outlined on the dry erase board. Well, fair enough. Let's take your friend and family member Fred right to a recent white paper from the Economic Forum titled Framework for Developing a National Artificial Intelligence Strategy. Notice they use the word national, and they don't use the word private sector.
So this is part of their fourth industrial revolution, which is a big component of the Great Reset agenda. And their timeline is starting off in 2020, and it extends through 2025, and like we already know, 2030. It starts with phase 1. This is utilization of AI and data. Phase number 2, they want to institute public use of this AI and data and develop it across various domains. Phase 3, the ecosystem, or economy, is built by connecting multiplying domains. An ecosystem is established as various multiplying domains are connected and merged. And they're using the word domain to replace sectors of the economy. So it'd be easier to understand if we just read it in normal human speak. An ecosystem is established as various multiplying sectors of the economy are connected and merged. And then they give us this diagram, how it would work. Your data, everything that you say, every conversation, your vital signs, actions, and search history on the internet goes straight into ABC. Everything you do in your life and workspace goes straight into ABC. Nature and urban space also goes into ABC. And you'll notice they push for urban living more and more and more. And I think the reason they do this is so they can have smart cities. So everything is connected to the brain cloud. The more things they can connect the artificial intelligence brain cloud, the more efficiently they can allocate resources. And just be very, very clear, this is how they're thinking. This is not how I'm thinking. I'm simply explaining their, we'll call it quote unquote logic. So all the data dumps into what they're calling the artificial intelligence as a service. I prefer ABC. And it creates complex application services. And this is just another way of saying an algorithm that would produce the same data as prices did before. Artificial intelligence then allocates scarce resources and controls the goods and services produced in the real economy. And just so you can see, I'm not putting words in their mouth. We have an arrow coming out of the, we'll call it the new ecosystem or the new economy, going back into the personal lives of the individuals with new value creation or supply of goods and services. And ironically, they're calling this a virtuous cycle. What we just saw is their version of exactly what I have drawn on the whiteboard.
And just an FYI, I drew this prior to finding the white paper. So when I drew this on the board and then started doing research and found that white paper, you can imagine how shocked I actually was, or maybe I shouldn't be shocked anymore. The bottom line is, when I was growing up, we lived in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I don't spend too much time in the United States, and I've just come back over the past couple months, and I see very little freedom and very little bravery. In fact, with all these lockdowns, I see many fellow Americans that are eagerly trading all of their personal liberty and freedom for just an ounce of perceived safety. We've gone from the land of the free and the home of the brave to many people demanding that we live in the land of the lockdown and the home of the cowardly. But it doesn't have to be this way. You see, Rebel Capitalist isn't just the name of my program. It's the name of a movement. That's what I wanted it to be. We can all be rebel capitalists and stand up for free market capitalism, stand up for private property rights, personal freedom, and liberty. It's up to us to make the decision right now to non-violently go out and spread the message of the benefits of our belief system and tell these central planners to get the
I bet you can't guess what it is.
Action is happening. Smart contract development, virtual machine development, DeFi development. Thus, Ethereum is where all the blockchain devs are too. So just think about it for a second, my friends. From all of Ethereum's competitors, they all have one thing in common. They're all trying to build bridges back to Ethereum. They're all utilizing the Ethereum virtual machine in some form. They aren't trying to silo themselves off from Ethereum. Why? Well, many of these projects tried that route for some reason or another. Ripple to XRP, they actually attempted to be Ethereum compatible in 2017. As we can see, Interledger tweeted about a sneak preview of a payment demo between XRP and ETH. This was in May of 2017. Then 2 weeks later, June of 2017, CoinDesk dropped this article. Interoperability boost. Ripple sends blockchain transaction across 7 ledgers, which included Bitcoin and Ethereum. Well, in the article, they provide a link to the Bitcoin plugin GitHub. Let's see where it takes us. Well, into that certain plugin's GitHub, we look at the top. This plugin is now included in Interledger deprecated, meaning not used, and they might replace it. And going back to the folder, we can see that the Ethereum plugin is there too. Yikes, so no interoperability push. And then going to Interledger.js, not deprecated, we can see there is a replacement Ethereum plugin. But diving into that one, it is in beta, and down the roadmap, it's not complete. And as we can see, the last work done by the devs was nearly a year and a half ago in June 2019. So XRP, it's not going to be Ethereum compatible, but this hyped up airdrop is going to be compatible. Flare Network. And here it comes, what I predicted in this video, the Trojan horse attack against Ethereum DeFi. Now let me tell you about airdrops. Utility ones. Neo Ontology, ring a bell? Not good for the original long term. Funked up BS if you're an XRP holder in my opinion. Just listen more. Give it a second. So back in August, when I made that Trojan horse video, it was announced that Flare proposed an Ethereum-compatible bridge, allowing full interoperability both ways. But as we can see in the Cointelegraph article, Flare Network's collaboration with Ripple began in November last year and was funded by Ripple's development arm, Xspring. In February this year, Xspring announced its intention to develop a bridge between the two networks and sponsored 3 challenges during the ETH Denver Hackathon, all of which revolved around a bridge between XRP and Ethereum. Trojan horse attack, Xspring, XRP's development arm, Flare, both looking to build a bridge. The two are one, I hope you realize. And they were trying to coerce Ethereum devs to help them do it. Hopefully none of those devs fell for the greed-fueled bait. So did they? Well, we can check out the challenges at the hackathon. Here they are on Gitcoin for ETH Denver. Scrolling down, we can see that for 2 of their challenges, XRPs, they received 0 submissions. And for one, they got just 1 submission for the bridge. So who submitted and tried to help this bridge? Well, diving into it, you can see why I said tried. We can see it's still an open issue, as there was no winner. But scrolling down, one piece of work was submitted by Artem Frantisian, and diving into his solution, Bifrost, and the last commits to it were 8 months ago in April. So their Ethereum hackathon Trojan horse, it failed, but still, it's coming, the Flare network launch. And they're hyping it as the DeFi chain, Ethereum compatibility, and more. But they don't even have a bridge built yet. Back in August, Flare tweeted this about the bridge. 1. Likely one of the first governance proposals that the foundation is going to be asked to consider is integrating a trustless two-way bridge between Ethereum and Flare. And 2. This would allow FXRP to be used trustlessly on Ethereum, as well as providing a scaling platform for Ethereum tokens and applications, whilst giving access to the XRP market for existing Ethereum applications. This could bring together the XRP and Ethereum ecosystems. So they said a vote to integrate a bridge at launch with the first governance proposal, yet there isn't a bridge built. Me thinks that's just Ethereum DeFi vampire hype. But why, oh why are they still trying to build that Ethereum bridge? Why is it such a needed core component piece of each and every blockchain, including XRP? Well, a good place to see why is cryptofees.info. As we can see, Ethereum is the most active blockchain, providing the most transaction fees, over 4.3 million 24 hours, currently 2.75 times the amount of Bitcoin, the most valuable blockchain by market cap. Ethereum's outdoing it. Now, the third most active product is not even a blockchain. It's Uniswap, an Ethereum DApp, providing just behind Bitcoin 24 hours at 1.275 million. Then it's Binance Chain at just over 700K 24 hours, which is important, and we will get into that in a second. Then SushiSwap, just over 300K. Ethereum for Now DApp. Then Balancer, Ethereum, then Synthetics, Ethereum, then Ren, Ethereum, then Polymarkets, Ethereum, Curve, Ethereum, 0x, Ethereum, Omen, Ethereum. And guess what? At the bottom of crypto fees, it says the application data does not include Ethereum transaction fees. So this is pure fees from the DApps. And Omen, the prediction market DApp from DXDAO, is even providing more fees than XRP, as there it is below Omen. That is why they are building a bridge, as they are even below Ethereum DApps, like far below the top ones, as they did just $1,445 24 hours. And then other blockchains are even worse, Litecoin, Stellar, and even below them, Cardano. So remember I said the Nance chain, it was important. Well, they have surged up in the rankings on crypto fees because they have an Ethereum bridge built and it's ready to go, which only got moving in late October with B tokens, as seen from this article, October 29th to be exact. Now let's just go check out crypto fees on October 31st, 2 days after that post. Binance Chain only had just over $794. So since the launch of the Ethereum bridge, only a 93,238% increase. As we compare today, they now have nearly 718 grand on crypto fees. Binance Chain is a prime example of a bridge turning everything around, and the others are going to attempt to replicate it. It's desperation mode time for the others. XRP is building bridges. Cardano is building bridges. Some Bitcoin people are building bridges. Why? Because if they don't, they won't survive. But I'll tell you right now, there is not room for all. There are only so many blockchain developers, and they build on Ethereum with Solidity. And hardcore Ethereum devs, they are pretty damn loyal to Ethereum. Xspring's bridge attempt at ETH Denver looks to be a fail, as the reward was just a measly 1K in XRP. But greed, it fuels all. The Nance, they will spend the money, and they paid Solidity devs to get it done. They have their bridge and it's working. Is it decentralized and the best bridge in the industry? No, it's just like any other bridge. You're at the whim of the Ethereum network on the way in. As we can see from the Trust Wallet, aka Binance Pagan tutorial, it says, wait for confirmation. Since the tokens are coming from the ETH network, the confirmation might take a few minutes. And is it decentralized? Methinks not yet, not at all. As if you go to their validator set and you try to search for any information about the validators, there is nothing. You search by their names, nothing. Stake Pulse, nothing. Just the stats on Binance, Picoin, Google search, nothing, just the stats. And it continues for the others, although some of them are the names of mountains in specific regions or countries. Everest, Aconcagua, Ararat, places where Binance has set up shop. Or does someone really like mountains at the Nance? Well, viewers, it's coming, those sneaky bridges, but it's not a bad thing for Ethereum whatsoever. The others, they're leeches, and it actually proves Ethereum's value as the central hub of the cryptoverse. So build away, which in my opinion is bending the knee. Cheers, I'll see you next time.
Alright guys, we're back in the compound here in Cagayan and this is a very special occasion because Jun is back, Melissa Jun. The Cummings Moments is here, and Master Chef Jundi is here. But speaking of that word, Master Chef, all of these guys are actually amazing.
What the hell is up with XRP? That's the question many of you are no doubt asking. Indeed, I sometimes find it hard to believe that XRP had an all-time high of almost $4 in the altcoin bull run. Ah, those were the days. But it's not just that. As some other altcoins appear to have been in recovery, XRP has continued its relatively lackluster performance. Indeed, this year has seen it as one of the worst performing major altcoins. So the question remains, why? My name is Guy, and in this video I'll be trying to answer just that. Also, be sure to watch till the very end if you want my personal take on whether there is light at the end of the blockchain for XRP. Before I get going, some of the boring stuff. Guy is not a financial advisor, sadly, so whatever you do, do not take this as financial advice. It's just an educational resource. Also, if this is your first time joining us, welcome to my community. While you're here, you may want to tap that subscribe button and ping that bell. I release these regularly and it's best to get them while they're hot. Finally, I should disclose that I don't hold any XRP. There was a time I did, but I sold it all in 2017, so I have no dog in this fight. All set then? Bang on. Let's jump in. Before I can cover XRP, I need to give a quick overview of what it is. If you're already fully clued up, then feel free to skip ahead with the timestamps I've provided below. Now, the first and most important thing to understand about XRP is that it is not Ripple. I often see people making the mistake of thinking that both are interchangeable names for the crypto. But they are entirely different things. XRP is an open source cryptocurrency that runs on the XRP ledger. Anyone can build on the XRP ledger and anyone can spin up an XRP node. The main purpose of this ledger is to build an internet of value where money can be sent around the world as quickly as email. Ripple, on the other hand, is a for-profit fintech company that is building enterprise-level tech for financial institutions. Ripple was involved in the development of the XRP ledger, and Ripple Inc. is still one of the largest holders of XRP. It's easy to get confused though. Despite how much they want to separate the two, the fortunes of XRP are often intertwined with those of Ripple. Indeed, up until about a year ago, XRP was also called Ripple on a number of exchanges. I won't bore you with too much of the details here, but if you want a complete overview on it, then I encourage you to watch my previous video on it right over here. Moving on though, let's take a look at the price dynamics and tokenomics of XRP, shall we? Now, just like any other asset on the market, price is determined by a number of factors, some more speculative and others more fundamental in nature. There is no doubt that the rally that occurred in late 2017 was one driven by speculation, completely devoid of any sort of fundamental explanation. Of course, this was not specific to XRP though. We know of many altcoins that saw similar levels of frenzy. However, what are the fundamental drivers behind XRP? Well, in my view, it is these supply-demand factors. Retail investor demand, people like you and me. Institutional investor demand, hedge funds and the like. Financial institution utility demand, banks, payment processors, remittance, etc. Ripple Inc. sales and Ripple founder sales. Now those last two are on the supply side and they are important to understand. Yes, XRP has a max supply of 100 billion, but only about 44% of that is currently circulating. The rest of this supply is locked up either in escrow or in the hands of the founders. That means that when more of this supply is unlocked, if demand is not there to meet it, price is likely to fall. Okay, so that should sound pretty clear. Now, in order for me to analyze the price impact, I'm going to go over each of those factors and explain what impact they're likely having on the XRP dynamics. Let's start with that retail investor demand. There is no doubt that this was one of the largest factors that contributed to the 2017 XRP bonanza. I remember it like it was yesterday. Mates of mine who couldn't register exchange accounts because they were full were dying to buy XRP off me OTC. Some of them I did oblige, others I couldn't help. It really was an insane time in the crypto markets. This was no doubt being fed by the round-the-clock news coverage of XRP's ascent. You even had the likes of CNBC giving their viewers a step-by-step guide about how to buy XRP. There was also a highly passionate community that was spreading the good word of XRP and decentralized payments. They were one of the most active and engaged of any that I've seen. An XRP army. All of this helped XRP go parabolic, amazingly so. In late 2017, I was getting nervous and decided to sell the majority of my XRP. I then proceeded to watch with immense regret as it continued its ascent towards $4. Of course, we all know that it never reached that level, and in line with most of the altcoin space, is far away from those levels today. Okay, so why am I telling you this? Well, because I'm trying to illustrate just how much of an impact the retail investor market has had on the price of XRP. So one has to ask themselves if this fervent demand could one day come back. Looking at some research from the likes of eToro, the XRP army has dwindled in number. In the first quarter of 2020, the research found that the number of Twitter users discussing the cryptocurrency has fallen by 16%. There is also data from the Telegram sphere that shows a falling interest in Ripple or XRP-related topics. Here is research that was done on the number of users that have fallen in specific Telegram channels over the past 2 years. You can see the Ripple channel has had a fall of almost 64%. Moreover, some high-profile members who either had popular Twitter profiles or who published regular blogs have thrown in the towel. With no generals to lead an army, the rest tends to fall by the wayside. So yes, from a retail investor side, it doesn't look like we have the right ingredients for a rally anytime soon. I could be wrong, but the data does not lie. Anyways, on to our next demand driver, and that is institutional investor demand. Now, when I'm referring to institutional investor demand, I'm talking about those funds that would buy XRP in order to make a profit on price appreciation. Hedge funds, crypto funds, and other types of investment vehicles. So, are they buying XRP? Well, it can sometimes be hard to assess, as not many funds have to publicly disclose their holdings. We all know of Arrington XRP Capital that was started by the TechCrunch founder. This fund was fully denominated in XRP and was meant to make investments in XRP. However, as was disclosed at an interview in 2018, the fund has more exposure to Bitcoin than it does to XRP. One only has to wonder what that number looks like now, given the price fall. Another institutional investment vehicle that we can look at is Grayscale Investments. They're perhaps best known for their Bitcoin investment trust. They launched a number of other funds, including Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and in May of 2018, an XRP fund. So let's compare some of these, shall we? In May of last year, on the XRP fund, they had about $4 million in assets under management, and they have just north of 135,000 outstanding shares. Today, there is only $2.6 million under management with just below 160,000 shares. Now, indeed, the fall in AUM was mainly as a result of the fall in price. However, that limited share growth is quite disappointing. Taking a look at the Ethereum fund, here is the AUM at the same time last year, about 7.5 million with 838,000 outstanding shares. Let's take a look at that number now. Over $210 million under management and over 30 million outstanding shares. So it really is quite stark. One wouldn't expect such a discrepancy for a currency that is just behind ETH in terms of market cap rankings. Okay, that may be a fluke. Let's take a look at another crypto investment trust at Grayscale. Here is the Ethereum Classic AUM and shares outstanding in 2019, and here is the number today. Both have grown considerably. Less so than Ethereum, but more than XRP. So quite clearly, institutional investors are not too keen on the XRP investment trust at Grayscale. Why is this important, you ask? Well, Grayscale is one of the most well-known crypto investment trust companies in the US. Institutional investors such as hedge funds, pensions, and endowments use trust as a secure and regulated way to get exposure to a particular asset. In the case of their Bitcoin fund, they have over $2 billion under management. So why aren't these institutions so hot for XRP? Well, we can get an idea from the comments that Morgan Creek Digital's CEO made in a recent interview. Mark Yusko said that coins like XRP and Stellar's XRM are too centralized for his liking, and used some interesting analogies with traditional stocks. I've linked to the piece below if you want to read further. Anyways, it's not so likely that we're going to see a rush from institutions to buy out XRP anytime soon. But there is one source of demand that could be more promising than retail and institutional investors, and that is utility demand from financial institutions. The reason that I'm clearly making a distinction here is because these banks, remittance companies, and payment providers need XRP as settlement mechanism. They are not buying it specifically for the purposes of price appreciation. And on this front, it appears to be increasing. These clients are mostly those that sign up to use RippleNet, Ripple's global payment network and settlement platform. In total, there have been over 300 financial institutions that have joined RippleNet since the company started rolling out its technology. There are also some pretty high-profile names in that list, which include the likes of Santander, MoneyGram, and American Express. This client list is also constantly growing, with a new one being added every few weeks. It also makes sense from a financial institution's perspective, and was one of the reasons that I was bullish on XRP back in the day. Cross-border payments were the bane of my existence, and the solution provided by Ripple was a breath of fresh air. Near instant settlement with close to zero fees. It's this reason that I think that more and more clients are likely to sign up. I don't see that much competition in the space for cross-border remittance, for example. I won't go into all the details and partnerships here, but I encourage you to take a look at the Ripple blog where they give you an in-depth update, also linked to below. Now, these users of RippleNet will need XRP to settle the transactions. However, a lot of them are not buying that XRP on the open market. They are, in fact, buying it straight from Ripple Inc. And this then brings me on to one of the supply forces in the XRP price equation. For those of you who don't know, Ripple Labs holds a lot of XRP. According to their Q4 2019 report, 49.9 billion XRP is held in an escrow. Also, excluding this escrow, Ripple holds about 13% of the outstanding XRP supply. Every month, 1 billion XRP is unlocked from the escrow and released to Ripple. The escrow was set up to provide, quote, predictability to the XRP supply. Once these XRP are unlocked and in the hands of Ripple, they make a call on what to do with it. Either they can place some of that XRP back into escrow, or they can sell it on the open market. When it comes to these sales, last year was one of Ripple's biggest. In total, they sold about $500 million worth of XRP onto the market. This actually drew criticism from many in the XRP community, as they saw it as Ripple dumping the crypto onto the market. Now, I don't think this is entirely true, as they did place 1 billion XRP back into escrow in Q4 of last year. However, it doesn't cover that $500 million in sales. Then you also have to consider that some of the buyers could sell that XRP on the open markets once they were able to. Okay, so I know what you're wondering. Why is Ripple even selling this XRP? Well, according to the Ripple CEO, XRP sales are a key component of their profitability. It's quite clearly laid out in this piece in the Financial Times. Ripple would be loss-making if it were not for the sale of XRP. Not ideal at all. Let's also not forget that Ripple may have its eyes on an IPO in the not-too-distant future. If that is the case, then being cash flow positive is something that will definitely help to bolster that offering price. So, make of that what you may. Now, there's one more supply factor out there, and that is sale by founders. Well, more specifically, founder sales, as one of the unknown variables here is Jed McCaleb. For those of you who don't know, Jed McCaleb is one of the founders of Ripple who was gifted 9.5 billion XRP. Back in 2013, he left Ripple and went on to found Stellar. However, there were a lot of concerns around what he would do with his massive XRP holdings. In order to get some clarity, Ripple entered into a 7-year agreement with McCaleb to make sure that sales were made in a responsible way. This was disclosed in a post on the Ripple forum back in August of 2014. Since that time, he has been liquidating what he can, subject to the agreement and market conditions. According to this study by Whale Alert, they were able to track at least 1 billion XRP sales between that time and February of this year, so a pretty decent chunk. There's also no certainty as to what will happen once his remaining 8 billion or so XRP is free to be sold. Now, I don't happen to think he would dump it on the market. That would be pointless, as there would be no way that he could find that liquidity over a short period of time. He'll also want to make sure that he's selling it at a steady pace so as to not adversely impact his sale price. It's only logical. But that still means that he could be bringing more XRP onto the market on an ongoing basis. I mean, does he have a real incentive to hold it? He is, after all, working on a competing protocol. I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Bybit. Bybit is a cryptocurrency derivatives exchange that offers futures trading on Bitcoin, ETH, EOS, and XRP. However, that's not the only reason to get on Bybit. They have one of the most advanced trading platforms on the market, both from a user and infrastructure perspective. In fact, since their inception, there have been absolutely no overloads, and they've operated the impact on price. Cover it more in depth in my extended review, but it will basically mean that Ripple sold unregistered securities. If this is the case, the implications for XRP could be severe, as it will eliminate XRP's utility as a currency. Up until now, there has been no clarity from the SEC on it, and Ripple is currently fighting a class action lawsuit on the matter.
More than a quarter of a century ago, our guest today published a book about the future of technology called Life After Television. Quote, "The computer of the future will be as portable as your watch and as personal as your wallet. It will recognize speech and navigate streets, collect your mail and your news." Close quote. Our guest is worth listening to today, in other words, in large measure because he got so much right back then. His new book, Life After Google. George Gilder on Uncommon Knowledge now. Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. One of the nation's most important public intellectuals for more than 4 decades now, George Gilder is the author of 19 books. His 1980 bestseller, Wealth and Poverty, made a fresh argument for capitalism and became the volume that Ronald Reagan quoted more than any other. Other Gilder works, Knowledge and Power, The Scandal of Money, and Life After Television, which I mentioned just a moment ago. George Gilder's newest book, Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. George, welcome.
Great to be here, Peter, as always.
George, in Life After Google, you refer to Google, the company that all of us use for search and Gmail and mapping. You refer to Google, this marvel, as neo-Marxist. What on earth do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people don't really understand what Marxism was. The key error of Marxism was Karl Marx's belief that the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century was a final human attainment, a kind of eschaton, that the problem of productivity and wealth creation had been solved forever.
The end of history of his day, so to speak.
Yeah, and from then on, the only challenge would be how to distribute wealth rather than how to create it. Well, Google Marxism just repeats Karl Marx's error with the new technology. Google believes that their AI, artificial intelligence, their machine learning, their robotics, their algorithmic biology, their search, and their solutions constitute a new eschaton, a new final achievement of human beings. It's even more grandiose than Carl's original vision, and that the Google people imagine a singularity where the machines will eclipse human minds and allow all of the rest of us to retire on beaches and collect a guaranteed annual income, the new fashion in Silicon Valley, while Brin and Page fly off with Elon Musk to some remote planet in a winner-take-all universe. And I think this is delusional. Google faces impossible business problems, contradictions in their strategy, flaws in their technology, misunderstandings of the very computer science that underlie all their technology. I think Google is having a nervous breakdown.
I just want to make sure I heard this right. You just called Larry Page and Sergey Brin these geniuses who in 20 years have gone from zero to a company with a market cap of 870 billion at market close yesterday. You just called them delusional. I heard that right?
Yep. There are a lot of delusional, brilliant Marxists in the world.
All right.
Don't you encounter them all the time? I mean, you live at Stanford.
Before we will return to your attack on Google, but first, how did Google do it? We just agreed. The company's founded in 1998, so we go from zero, non-existence, 20 years ago, and even 2 decades ago, to a market cap of, as I said, between 800 and 900 billion, depending on the market close the day people listen to us, which makes it the second most valuable enterprise on the face of the planet. Apple just crossed $1 trillion in valuation. So the question is, how did they do it? It is an accomplishment of some kind.
Oh, it's an absolutely fabulous accomplishment. They dominated this era. This is the Google era. We live in it. But the next step is to upload your mind into the Google cloud. And I balk at this next step in the Google system of the world.
You spent some time in Life After Google describing the Dalles, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is the huge Google data center up in Oregon. In Life After Google, you write of the diminishing returns of big data. So let me understand let me make sure I understand at least one part of your argument correctly. The delusions come next. First, there are certain almost physical constraints. We've reached the point now at which, no matter how big your data center, improvements in parsing data are only going to be incremental. It's going to be difficult to get enough power. It's going to be difficult to cool these machines adequately, which is why Google's big center is up at the Dalles, because there's a huge dam there, which means cheap hydroelectric power and cold water for cooling. So that's argument number one. They're bumping into physical limitations. Is that correct?
I think this is a symbol. The Dalles and all their data centers parked like aluminum plants beside big bodies of water or near glaciers or various other means of cooling, just like an industrial plant of the previous era. And I think that this cloud computing, which was a great triumph for its time and dominated its time, is now reaching the end of the line. A great computer scientist named Gordon Bell ordained a proposition called Bell's Law, which is that every 10 years, Moore's Law, which is the doubling of computer power every year, yields 100 to 1,000-fold rise in total computer capability and requires a completely new computer architecture. I wrote about the cloud first. I hailed the cloud in an article in Wired in 2006 and said that it would dominate the next Bell's Law phase. But it's now 12 years since 2006, and the that Bell's Law regime of cloud computing, huge data centers, all parked by bodies of water, is coming to an end.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand this. I want to emphasize this because I think I'm right about it. Cloud computing, I don't know who the genius was, maybe I'm talking to him now, who first conceived of the notion of the cloud, because it puts in the mind of the ordinary user the sense that somehow or other computing has now become ethereal. It's just up there. It's not up there. It's in big industrial scale operations at the Dalles in Oregon and other. So the
80 different sites around the world, I think Google has now.
Okay.
Big data
So
centers.
the cloud isn't the cloud, it's factories essentially of huge computers. That's correct?
Yes.
All right. You refer, again, let me quote Life After Google. Google is not just a company. It is a system of the world. That is a phrase that is important in this book. Google is a system of the world. What do you mean by that?
Well, a system of the, I think the first sort of great system of the world that unleashed the miracles of the industrial age and the British Empire and of the previous era was Isaac Newton. And he both developed calculus and the key laws of Newtonian physics, and then proceeded to establish as master of the mint in Britain the gold standard. And this together, the calculus, the physics, the gold standard, were really the pillars of the industrial era and Britain's amazing global dominance from a small island, and that was a great system of the world. It was implicitly deterministic, and
explain that term. How do you mean deterministic? Because Newton was a Christian.
Newton was a Christian and believed in free will, but his physics and his calculus implied a deterministic model.
If you did this, then this must happen.
That's right.
This action requires that reaction.
Right. A hermetically sealed system that always reproduces the same results with the same inputs, a predictable scheme. And this system of the world was essentially overthrown by Kurt Gödel.
Kurt Gödel is born in Austria. He's he comes to this country. His dates are late 19th century to the middle of the 20th century, roughly.
His great moment at age 23 or 4 was in 1930 when he addressed the great meeting at Königsberg in Austria that was going to establish mathematics as a complete system that could explain everything implicitly. If you had all the data and you had the mathematical algorithms, you could predict the entire future from the past. This was the great dream, and he permanently overthrew it with Gödel's incompleteness theory. He showed that any logical system whatsoever is necessarily dependent upon propositions that can't be proven within the logical system. And in proving this, he really invented a kind of computer software system where all the propositions and variables were expressed in numbers. So his proof that mathematics could not be coherent and completely consistent, that it depended on outside propositions, axioms, was a major breakthrough, and also established the computer age. Alan Turing then went on and took Gödel's formula and transformed it into a universal computer architecture, a Turing machine. And Turing machines are also dependent on oracles outside the machine to program them.
Okay.
Now Google says it has a system of the world where it's returning back to the deterministic realm, and with big data, they can predict everything. All the answers can be extracted from their aggregations of big data.
You're doing something that you do again and again in life after Google. You're operating on two levels. On one level, you're talking about technology. And Kurt Gödel, in developing these incompleteness theorems he's working on it in the 20s, and the big moment takes place in 30, is that correct?
In 1931.
31, okay. And he develops mathematical tools. On the way to proving his point, he develops mathematical tools which form the basis of computer software language.
Yeah.
So that's the technological point that George Gilder is making. But you are also always arguing about, I won't say theology, because you're not really taking on God, but you are arguing the deep structure of reality. What is reality really like? And so there are pages here that make me scratch my head, because you're talking about technology and math, and that's hard for me. And then there are pages that make my brain explode, because you're talking about reality itself. But I want to come back to this point. Gödel proved that there can be no human construct, no human system of thought that does not rely on some reality outside itself.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
And for theological interest, Gödel desperately feared that he might have proved the existence of God.
All right.
He and Einstein used to walk together through the streets of Princeton discussing theology derived from these cerebrations.
Both nervous that they may have been onto something even bigger than I see. All right. That's book number 20 for you, George. But back to book number 19. One other point about Google that you make, a shortcoming for Google, is that it gives everything away for free. And which, of course, I sent 10 emails this morning on Gmail for free. I haven't started my research for the afternoon, but I'll be using Google, and it'll be for free.
Yeah.
Okay, this is all wonderful as far as I can tell. George Gilder in Life After Google not only is free, a lie, but a price of zero signifies a return to the barter system, or a morass that the human race left behind in the Stone Age. Well, now I am confounded. How can this marvel of technology be dragging us back to the Stone Age?
Because of free, there are two key points about free. First of all, it avoids the price system. So it avoids liabilities to customers that you actually have to serve because the customers have paid you. It avoids the requirement of security, because who wants to steal something that's free? It doesn't completely avoid the obligations of security, but it essentially greatly relieves the problems of constantly conducting secure transactions with customers to whom you owe something. And it also prohibits learning, because the key to capitalism is learning curves. As I told you in my last meeting here, wealth is knowledge. And if wealth is knowledge, economic growth is learning. And one of the key instruments of learning in a capitalist system is the signal of prices. And by giving away all its products for free, Google avoids this precarious process of falsifiable learning that is the heart of capitalist growth. So by giving away products for free, they avoid the security challenge to a great extent. They avoid direct liabilities and responsibilities to real customers. And they avoid the learning process that allows capitalist growth.
When you say they avoid the security problem, the security problem you have in mind is what we all now feel every time we go on the web. We're afraid of identity theft. We're afraid of being hacked. We get alerts from Google itself saying, were you this user? Was that you who checked in and changed your password? The feeling that we're naked before, who knows, unknown, faceless enemy. That's the security problem they're avoiding, because if they give things away for free, security patches are good enough. That's the point?
But the fact is, security is not a video game. Security is an architecture. And the existing computer architecture, of which Google is the paramount exponent, is failing. It's filling the internet with clutter. It's failing with the smartphone. 30% of your payments for smartphone services go to download ads that you don't want to see. You really don't want these ads on your smartphones. They are not ads, they are minuses. And only 0.06% of these smartphone ads are clicked on. And according to surveys, 50% of these clicks, approximately, are in error. So only 0.03% of smartphone ads are actually desired. And this is a catastrophe. This is not a viable business, and Google is coming to the end of the line in smartphone advertising. It's trying to move from search, where it serves the rest of the internet, to solutions where Google is the answer man in the sky, and its AI, with its increasing accumulation of big data, can answer all your questions. But that's where I make the charge of delusional.
All right, the new system of the world. Again, life after Google. This very lack of concern with security will be Google's undoing. For every other player on the net, the lack of security is the most relevant threat to its current business model. This problem will be solved. So fundamental will security be to the new system that its very name will be derived from it. It will be the cryptocosm. Explain that term.
The cryptocosm refers to this amazing providential efflorescence of creativity that's erupted all around the world to supply a new architecture for the internet, and indeed, ultimately, a new architecture for the entire world economy. At a very time that the system of central banks, with its $5.1 trillion a day of currency trading that doesn't even arrive at settled currency values or significant currency values, and the architecture of the internet, which requires you to expose yourself, strip naked virtually before the cameras in order to conduct a transaction. You have to your passwords, pins, your usernames, your last four numbers of your social security, your mother's maiden name, your first school, your favorite pet, your irises, your DNA, this method of authenticating people to participate in internet transactions is bankrupt. They may imagine that this is a viable system, but it isn't. It is failing every day, and it's going to be replaced by the cryptocosm, by the blockchain, by a whole series of technologies deriving from the blockchain.
Right. So I want to use. Security is, I'm quoting again, security is not a procedure or mechanism, it is an architecture. The cryptocosm will start by defining the ground state. You don't build the building, you build the foundation. The ground state. It is the ultimate non-random reality. The ground state is you. The ground state is you. Explain that.
Well, the ground state in the cryptocosm is your private key, which validates you as your DNA identifies you. It's
so this is not. This isn't. You're not overreaching for the sake of argument. You are saying that in the cryptocosm, blockchain technology will permit us all to have some kind of
unimpeachable ID,
which is as individual to us and as undecryptable as our DNA.
Correct.
Okay. Wow. All right. And you'd better explain. And here I brace my. Here I'm just going to hold the table with both hands. You'd better explain for the layman. I'll give you a short paragraph. Blockchain. What is blockchain? Make me understand.
Blockchain
that,
is a new architecture, new security architecture for the internet that allows you to keep your information to yourself, and it distributes all the personal information all across the network, just as human intelligence is distributed across the world in individual human brains. It's not agglomerated in giant data clumps. It's human intelligence is distributed. The blockchain distributes personal data rather than concentrating it in one of the few big walled gardens, Google,
like
Facebook, concentrating it, and then forcing you to petition to the big centralized database for the right to be yourself on the internet. It's a distributed way of you keep your data to yourself and use whatever data you need to conduct a particular transaction. But it originated as a form of money, Bitcoin.
Right.
But it's often compared to cash because it seems to allow anonymity.
Yes.
But it's really better than cash. It's a major step forward beyond cash, because not only does it allow you to conduct anonymous transactions, it also enables you to demonstrate your behavior and your transactions unimpeachably, if you have to the IRS, to a prosecutor, to Preet Bharara, or whoever it may be. The blockchain gives you an immutable record that allows you to document your behavior. And it's always seemed to me that the key thing isn't really privacy, isn't really as critical as being able to prove that you didn't do something that a government wants to charge you with doing. You know, that the ability of attestation is an important advance that the blockchain offers, both in third world countries and in the United States.
All right. So your limited claim in Life After Google is that we have a new technology coming along that will make use of my smartphone and my desktop and your smartphone and your desktop and distribute transactions and intelligence and in some ways meaning across everybody's smartphones and computers, and it will render Google's fantastically huge investment in these 80 different data centers, it will render those beside the point, perhaps.
Yeah, well, we're very like those big abandoned aluminum plants that you can see up the Dalles.
Okay. That's the limited claim. Here's the larger claim, that blockchain can fix a lot of what's wrong with America. Life After Google. Blockchain technology will address the doldrums of centralization, insecurity, and sclerosis afflicting the current information economy. Okay, now how's that? How's that? IPOs are down. This is the Peter Thiel argument that we're just not getting the innovation that it feels as though we should have, right?
Yeah.
And how does blockchain jumpstart that, the whole economy?
Well, it's because blockchain corresponds with the reality of the world, which is the ultimate thinking element is the human mind, individual human minds, each one different, each one with a potential of its own, which can make its own contribution. And blockchain is an answer to this cloud mind, which I call sky computing, which you described so well with the computers and smartphones all around the world, contributing their cycles as needed to perform supercomputer computations as required, or 3D rendering from the internet, that is having 3D experiences provided across the internet, all from the skies, open skies, rather than from the clouds of Google, Facebook, and the rest of the giants, Apple and Amazon, and which are the biggest companies in the world, and a tremendous upset. I'm not for any kind of attacks on them. I'm of government regulation or whatever. I don't think that that's the problem at all. I think the problem is that they have a business plan and a technological solution that's inappropriate to a world full of individual human minds.
Okay, so here's your argument then. Your argument is the ultimate resource, the base of it all, is not any human construct, still less anything that has such a centralizing tendency as these huge data centers that we began by discussing. Yeah. Your argument is no, 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 no. It's the individual. The individual is the resource, and blockchain will empower individual human beings. Individual human beings in conditions of economic and political liberty are resources, and blockchain will empower them.
That's right. That's well put. That's the conclusion.
I've been reading you for 35 years, George.
And it is already happening. I mean, you mentioned the IPO crisis, you know, the 90% drop in the number of IPOs, the 50% shrinkage of the number of, more than 50%, 60% shrinkage of the number of public companies on the stock market. We're having a stock market boom while the number of companies shrinks drastically, and new challengers don't rise up. IPOs, but a Thiel fellow, you mentioned Peter Thiel, yes, who's a pivotal figure in life after Google. Peter Thiel has created these Thiel fellowships,
that's
and
right.
One of the first ones was Valerik Buterin, who established Ethereum just 5 or 6 years ago, which is a new blockchain based on Satoshi's Bitcoin blockchain, but improved and more generalized. And he created the new blockchain, a new global computer platform, a new programming language called Solidity, a new currency to finance a new form of smart contracts which could be implemented on this new computer platform, a new source of measurement for the value of the money in the energy consumption of the computer cycles required to implement the smart contracts, a huge new compound enterprise that in the last 12 months has essentially solved the IPO problem with ICOs. That's
initial coin offerings?
Initial coin offerings, initial Cayman offerings, initial crypto offerings, and they've raised $20 billion in less than 12 months for thousands of new companies. Many of them have failed, many have gone bust, just like the internet upsurge. But this is an amazing efflorescence that this Valerik Buterin, who I think is one of the great entrepreneurs of our history, has accomplished in 12 months. Pretty much solved the IPO problem. The Chinese are rebelling because cryptocurrencies are global, and the Chinese are skittish about anything that allows the globalization of Chinese capital that's not completely controlled. But anyway, China is deeply involved in all these new cryptocosmic developments.
George, a special topic. You touch on it, if you don't more than you discussed it at some length in Life After Google. It's not the central point, but it's a special topic. Artificial intelligence. In Life After Google, you describe a 2017 conference of technologists at Asilomar, California. Quote, they gathered at Asilomar to alert the world to the dire threat posed by, well, by themselves, by Silicon Valley. Their computer technology, artificial intelligence, had gained such power and momentum that they now deemed it nothing less than a menace to mankind. To the Googleplex intellectuals, mathematics is essentially a doomsday machine, close quote. And they're wrong?
Yeah, they forgot Gilder. They just don't understand their own technology. It's sad, but they don't.
Okay, hold on.
They imagine that
Hold on. You're talking about Elon Musk and his buddies Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the Googleplex intellectuals.
Musk essentially funded that Asilomar conference.
However, now I see you and I raise you, George. I'm going to listen to this intellectual, Henry Kissinger, writing in the Atlantic magazine this past spring, quote, heretofore, the technological advance that most altered the course of modern history was the invention of the printing press in the 15th century. But now, the world is experiencing an even more sweeping technological revolution whose culmination may be a world relying on machines ungoverned by ethical or philosophical norms, close quote. Now you're taking on Henry Kissinger. Go ahead.
He was my tutor.
At Harvard in the old days?
Yeah, he was assigned to be my tutor. I was something of a rebellious student, and I never quite...
Even then?
But I loved Henry. He is a great man. And he has absorbed the Google system of the world. And he is wrong. Artificial intelligence is a terrific extension of human intelligence. It requires an oracle just like any other machine extension.
It's still a tool.
It still
requires being held in a human hand in a certain sense.
Yes, and it in no way usurps the human brain. That whole concept that somehow a machine can usurp the human mind and excel the human mind.
Well,
it's true only if you say that the abacus or the calculator excels the human mind. Of course they do in certain functions, but when Garry Kasparov competes with Big Blue, Gary's using 12 to 14 watts of energy, and is not connected to anything beyond his own mind, while Big Blue is using essentially gigawatts of energy connected to those big cloud data centers, and it just isn't. And moreover, they're addressing a deterministic problem. And a deterministic problem can be solved by a machine. But deterministic problems are interesting, but irrelevant to information, as Claude Shannon showed. Information is defined as surprise. It's unexpected bits. It's entropy, as he called it. And surprise is the essence of human creativity. Surprises in a machine is a breakdown. It's bad news when your machine starts surprising you. And the way the Google people simulate creativity in machines is they introduce randomness to the machines. And they pretend that that is somehow simulating creativity. But randomness is minus information. They're subtracting information rather than adding it. It's just like their ads are actually minuses. Their creative inputs into their machines are actually minuses as well.
All right. So here's what we all have in the backs of our minds. 2001 Space Odyssey, in which Hal, he takes over the spaceship.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
It's a funny scene, but it's of course chilling. And in those days, it was fiction, which is why it was funny.
Yeah.
But that's what everybody has in his mind, that the machines will take over. They'll start giving us orders. You said you were taught by Henry Kissinger, or you were supposed to have been taught by him. Another person you know well is Ray Kurzweil.
I do.
Who is at Google now. And Ray Kurzweil wrote a book in 2005 entitled The Singularity is Near. And he argues that machines would become so intelligent that the distinction between computers and humans would disappear. Yeah. Hal would take over. And you say the machines will never be that smart, or you say it is in principle impossible. It doesn't matter how smart they are.
Yeah, it's in principle impossible. That machines do not essentially think. They don't know anything. There are systems of gates, of dumb components. They lack this creativity, which is epitomized in all the unexpected bits, the surprising results that human minds and imaginations can generate. Right. Computers are deterministic. They're machines. And Ray wrote a book called How to Create a Mind. It's a brilliant exposition of how to make a good speech recognizer. And in that book, he pretty much concludes that consciousness isn't really an issue. Consciousness is an emergent effect. It's an epiphenomenon of these machine processes that computer scientists understand. But this is just nonsense. If you don't understand consciousness, you don't understand thinking. Thinking doesn't produce consciousness. Consciousness produces thinking. And all these computer scientists are trying to explain away consciousness. But that's where we are. That's where we live. That's how we think. That's the issue. Right. And to say, oh, well, we don't know what consciousness is, but our machines are going to compute so fast that it won't matter, that consciousness will emerge like one of their clouds, I think is just another fundamental vanity of the Valley.
Got it. Last questions, George. In your earlier book, Life After Television, published again in 1990, you predicted computers as small as watches, speech recognition, mapping, navigation systems. You got a lot right. But you also predicted, this was in some ways the fundamental argument of the book, that as we went from broadcast television to the 500 channels of cable, and now, of course, we have the essentially infinite channels of Netflix and YouTube and all the rest, this direct streaming, as we did that, programming would no longer need to cater to the lowest common denominator. So we would no longer all be watching Claptrap, like the Beverly Hillbillies. You'd go online and you'd be able to pursue your interest in opera. Someone else would be studying calculus. Somebody else would be learning a language. We would be enlightened. We would be ennobled.
Well, that's true.
Well, some of that has happened.
Yeah.
But you didn't tell us that porn was going to be absolutely pervasive. You didn't tell us that kids...
I think I did tell you that porn would be
in Life
pervasive.
After Television?
I think I mentioned that porn is pretty hard to escape. But anyway.
Okay, so but
I was wrong. I was
what I'm
wrong.
trying to say is it was a wonderfully optimistic. I still remember I went through it in one reading. I started it at lunchtime, and I neglected my work for the rest of the day because, in any event, it was a wonderful book. But it didn't work out as happily as one would have expected from reading that book. Father of children, you're a father of children. You have a grandchild. The kids have these phones in their hands so long that attention spans suffer, family conversations. Here's Henry Kissinger again. Inundated via social media with the opinions of multitudes, users are diverted from introspection. These pressures weaken the fortitude required to develop and sustain convictions that can be implemented only by traveling a lonely road, which is the essence of creativity, close quote. What do you do with this argument that it didn't work out? Technology has not ennobled us. It's made us passive and uncreative and lonely.
Well, I think we were passive, uncreative, and lonely before. I think there's a certain illusion of a golden age that somehow we had privacy, we had creativity, we attained virtue in a different way than we do today. I'm sort of skeptical of the golden age idea, but I'm also skeptical of the idea that this technology is the eschaton, that it's the final thing, that this
the blockchain. What you're talking about?
AI. AI and all these Google era stuff that produce the effects that you're describing. And I agree with the effects you're describing, essentially. But I do believe that the blockchain and related cryptographic technologies, it's part of a creative insurgency, are an almost perfect answer to the problems that currently afflict the net.
Let me try one more.
They provide this distribution of intelligence and distribution of private rights and points of view that has been lost to some extent in the cloud.
Let me try one more line of attack on an old friend who knows 1,000 times more about all this than I do, but it's a layman's attack.
Okay.
And it's this. In Life After Television, published in 1990, and again, I can just remember what an event it was to read that book. It was wonderfully optimistic. This is going to make things better. Well, actually, we have all the kludge that you were talking about, the ads we don't want, all that we just discussed. And now you write Life After Google. This is it. Blockchain is going to solve all the problems. And so, what about original sin? What about we're stuck with this? Or what about, I'm thinking now, you brush against theology, and I know it interests you. What about 20th century theologian Jacques Maritain, who argued that as sin and redemption work themselves out in history, things are getting better, but also worse at the same time. And that is the human condition. So even blockchain is another tool. It will be morally neutral. It'll have wonderful benefits, but it may have significant costs. I'm trying to get George Gilder to accept some piece of the tragic view of life.
Well, I loved it. Unamuno's The Tragic View of Life. Ortega y Gasset was one of my favorite philosophers.
All right.
And so I accept the tragic view of life. We're all going to die. We're all...
Blockchain won't solve that one.
Blockchain won't solve that one. Blockchain won't solve many of the intrinsic torments of life and sin on this earth. I readily acknowledge that. Blockchain is part of the public world where the great human adventures are conducted. The great new companies are launched. The continued dynamism of human creativity is expressed. And what I'm arguing against is what Bill Buckley used to call immanentizing the eschaton, imagining that some technology that you've come up with last week is the final technology that will end the human adventure, that will subsume all our minds in the clouds, governed by 8 giant companies in China and the US, and with some few nerds in Israel contributing all the new ideas. This is the vision that I don't think is going to prevail. I think the human adventure will continue after Google.
George Gilder, author of Life After Google, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us.
Open it up!
Fifth spot, well, not firmly, I can't say that because market cap is 5.18 billion. Chainlink is right at its heels at 5.178 billion, so that'll be flipping around throughout the whole week. Then we've got Litecoin, Cardano up 22% for the 7-day, down a little bit, but I'm looking at Cardano. I'm really going to be delving into that project a lot more coming up, and I'll tell you all about it. So then going down, Polkadot 3.7 up, 1.5. Anything fantastic? No, not really. Let's take a look at what this looks like, not in USD, but how about in Bitcoin? So of course we're looking at Bitcoin. It's all zeros across the board for Bitcoin. But how does that in relation as far as Ethereum? Well, Ethereum down a half to the top crypto. 3.9 for 7-day. XRP, roughly about the same thing. I mean, there really isn't. I like to take a look at this because I like a different view as opposed to the dollar, because it kind of just gives me like a better judgment of what is happening with the overall crypto market. Down 2.8 for Chainlink, 12%. Litecoin up 26, so roughly the same. Not too much really action going on here. 7.8 for NEM, 1.8. All right, so what you're looking at here is in relation to how these altcoins are doing as compared to Bitcoin, not in dollars, but just as it compares to the king crypto. And I know people say, it's old, but I mean, it is what it is. So this is how you're doing if you would have, gone against, not put your money in Bitcoin. I mean, like Litecoin, you'd be up. What else? Polkadot, a little bit. And really, that's it. Waves, Zilliqa, Ampleforth, Nexo, 12.8. So you can see that when people talk about Bitcoin as being the main one, well, there's a reason. So understand the comment section, but let's go to today's top stories. This is big for a lot of reasons. And when we talk about this, it's all about Coinbase just going, you know what? We're going to do what Coinbase wants to do, not what you guys want to do, what we want to do. And I think that is one of the big downfalls of companies is that they don't really listen to their customers. The companies that do, that really, pay attention to like what their customers want, take a look at Amazon. Anything the customer wants, essentially they get. I mean, that's just how it is. But when we take a look at businesses that don't listen and pay attention, there's the ones that just falter and fall. So here's what's going on. Coinbase is reluctant to support the Flare's Spark airdrop, despite holding a massive amount of XRP. So what's happening here? Coinbase, winning exchange in the US, can't catch a break. That's the truth. It riled up the XRP army after refusing to participate in the upcoming airdrop of Flare Network's Spark token. So they didn't come out and just say, hey, we're not going to do it. Tough luck. Really what it is Flare going, hey, we've reached out. They haven't reached out to us. It's coming up on December, so they're not going to do it. It's just too late. And this is actually coming from the actual tweet from Flare Network. So they stated Coinbase is barely engaged with Flare. They hold about 3 billion of your XRP. Yeah, 3 billion. Did I say 3 million? 3 billion, excuse me. It's likely too late for them to do the work to support the Spark distribution at this point. And then Santiago says, hey, because they got that all locked up, they're not going to do anything. Are you going to redistribute those unused Spark tokens to the remainder in the same way as Exclusion? Meaning, since that is all locked up, which Spark should go to those holders, and it's supposed to be one-to-one for all XRP holders, what are you going to do? And he asked, can you just give us the rest? Because those people aren't, really including themselves in the community. Because if they did, they would know about this. And Flare said, you know what? We're not going to consider it. It's going to be what actually happens. So what they're saying is that yes, they're going to redistribute the 3 billion Spark tokens that were supposed to go to people who hold XRP in Coinbase, and going to redistribute to everybody who has it in the correct wallets. What are the correct wallets and exchanges? Well, let me show you. This is from Status. If you don't know Status, he's like huge in the XRP community, and he has a lot of these great little graphics. So here's the 28 exchanges that we know about so far. You got Uphold, I always say BitThumb. Tell me say BitHump, whatever. BitTrue, ZB, Binance, eToro, Bitstamp, Index, Crypto.com, Bitso, Tokens, Coinfield, BitPay, Upbit, GoPax, Probit, CoinSpot, KuCoin, BKEX, WazirX, I think that's the one from India, BitCub, and Corbit. Here's the 10 wallets: Zoom, Ledger, Guardia, Kobo, Exodus, and then for support, MetaMask, GateHub, SafePal, and Decent. So those are the ones that he has on there. I think this is old. Let me tell you why. Because this was a video that was just put out by Celsius, and this is the Celsius Chief Technical Officer. His name is Nuke. I think his name is Nuke. Man, what a great name, Nuke. So Nuke come here and says, hey, yeah, we will definitely be supporting this airdrop. And he just lays it out. It's like 2 minutes. I'll link in the description. You can watch it yourself. But he just says, you don't have to do anything. There's nothing to do. Just make sure you don't screw up and move your XRP around. Just leave it in there and everything will be okay. He also addresses about the redistribution by Spark. He says, if you're going to get more than one, we're going to handle that. So don't worry about it. Just leave it in there. Don't do anything. And that's it. He says it's going to happen on December 12th. I believe is the date. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, but I'm pretty sure. And he gives a great advice. He says, don't transfer on December 12th because it happens, at 12:01 a.m. Do it a day or 2 days before. I mean, really, honestly, you should have all your XRP where you want it to be right now. And that's all you got to do. So just do it like that. And then I also heard rumblings that Voyager was going to do it, but I couldn't get any confirmation. In our last interview with the CEO, Steve Ehrlich, this was on October 19th, he said, hey, man, we're really trying hard. We're really, getting things done. And I was like, all right. And I like Steve. I believe Steve. And he actually said that they're working on allowing more cryptocurrency tokens and coins to be taken off the platform. And they actually did come true with that because they just allowed Cardano to be taken off the network, which is huge. I really appreciate that. So he said he's working on it. And then I didn't see anything on the website. It's a pretty inclusive search. And I couldn't find anything. So I just reached out to him on Twitter. I sent him a direct message. I go, hey, man, I know you're just you're waiting for your jets to get pummeled by it says spammed, but I try to say spanked. Spanked by the Bengals today, but I'm doing a video on all things XRP Spark airdrop. I saw some of you guys are going to support it. Was that already announced? Because I can't find anything. He said, yeah, we said on Twitter, but it's not in a formal release, but yes, we are. Go Giants. I said, yeah, well, good luck with that. So you heard it right here. This is Steve Ehrlich. He's the CEO of Voyager. He's saying, yes, we're going to support it. So just leave your XRP in that wallet just like you would with Celsius because they're going to support it. And then it's going to be the same type of thing. If you get more than one, that's fine. They'll give you more than one. So that's the big thing. And this is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. But on the flip side, let's talk about who's not going to support it. Coinbase is going to support it. Also, Kraken just came out and said, look, we don't have any plans to support